I don't know if I'm ready for this. That's right. Although, God help us. What are we getting into? We got stuff to watch to keep us entertained. We got video games and we got energy drinks to keep us awake. Okay? I think we'll be fine. I think we'll be good, actually. We prepared for this. We came well equipped. I did sleep last night, for those who are wondering. I streamed for about 15 hours in preparation for this. We're going to be baking a pie today, because we're going to my parents' tomorrow. God willing, we don't get hit with the worst weather storm on Earth. I don't think we will, though. I am expecting some snow, but it won't be that bad. Let's open up the playlist. See if I got any board game moves to play first. I do. So I streamed for 16 hours yesterday, or 15, and the YouTube video only processed about 11 of them. So we'll see if it actually processes the entire stream. I hope it does, because it's 1 month for every month sober. I think I should talk a little bit about myself before we start watching a bunch of random videos, right? I used to be addicted to methamphetamine. I was using meth off and on for years. I hit it very well. Although in retrospect, if you look back on my channel and in my life, it's pretty freaking obvious that I was on stuff. But most people thought I was just using psychedelics, like a normal experimental teenager. Nope, I was using meth. Eventually, my drug use resulted in everyday use, which accumulated in a psychotic breakdown, which resulted in me getting put on disability, which is where we are now. I cleaned up my act, I sobered up, and I have been 16 months clean. I still smoke cannabis, and that is the only, well, I guess alcohol too. I still drink. Cannabis and alcohol are the only substances that I actively consume. Everyone around me is very proud of the steps that I have took. So today, I'm 16 months sober, almost to the date, almost. We are going to stream for 16 hours. I hope you enjoy.
Slots, DraftKings Casino app's got you covered. They have tons of slots to choose from. All these options, I feel like a slot.
I'm the papa. New players play $5.
WWE.
You do know it's fake, right?
More real than any other TV show, WWE Raw features live, death-defying stunts performed in front of an audience of thousands every week. People who feel the need to tell you that wrestling isn't real clearly don't watch wrestling, because the show features an undead wizard, leprechauns, an evil group of male cheerleaders. This show does not pretend to be an athletic competition. Instead, it's a TV show about a wrestling show. It has more in common with Game of Thrones than it does with UFC. And if you follow one character all the way through, you can see that this format allows the telling of interesting, diverse, and compelling stories. And there is no better place to start than with probably my favorite wrestler, Triple H.
Wrestling isn't wrestling. Chapter 1, Sex and Money.
The character Hunter Hearst Helmsley is introduced in the mid-90s. Basically this snobby Connecticut blue blood character. He's from this super rich family. Someone who his whole life has just been told, like, you're the best, you're the best. And for reasons we don't really understand, he's decided to become a professional wrestler. So like this fancy, pretentious guy rolls up his sleeves and he gets in there and... For a while, Hunter Hearst Helmsley is just getting his ass kicked, week in, week out. At around the same time, a guy named Shawn Michaels is on the top of the mountain. He's a main eventer. He's challenging for the heavyweight title. He's kind of an effeminate male stripper, gyrating, pretty boy, weirdo.
He's just the
He and
sexy
Triple H
boy.
kind of become friends. Triple H is a lower level guy. Shawn Michaels is a higher level guy. Shawn Michaels is like, my hair, oh my God, Triple H, my hair. And then Triple H is like, my hair too, I'm pretty, I could be pretty. Now at this point, wrestling is basically like wrestling is always portrayed. So you have these like big cartoony muscle guys and they go, I'm from America and I'm American, and then a guy comes and he says, I'm the Russian guy. Wrestling was basically a Saturday morning cartoon. You see, this is where Shawn Michaels and Triple H come in. Shawn Michaels goes to Triple H and says, I have a plan to get us both noticed. Are you ready? And it's a crazy fucking plan. They get this big blue woman called Chyna, and they pop out like, oh, suck it, suck my dick. Yeah, what up? Wrestling's R-rated now. Titty dick, suck a vagina. And these two guys are going crazy on live television. Ooh, look at my butt. My butt can talk. Ooh, I'm gonna take out my balls and see what happens. There hadn't been characters like this. So the show completely changed. Suddenly all the kids watching it were like,
Suck it! They're talking about sucking dicks right on TV! I want to say suck it to all of my friends. $5 for the Dick Sucker t-shirt, please!
True.
So these two idiot douchebags run afoul of Stone Cold Steve Austin, and Stone Cold beats the ever-living shit out of Shawn Michaels. Shawn Michaels disappears. Oh, my neck hurt, and my back hurt. And for the first time, Triple H is alone at the top of the card. This is my time. I can do this. I didn't need Shawn Michaels. He was holding me back. I can become World Heavyweight Champion. Wrong. Mistake. You see, Triple H is doing this right at the time that wrestling is filled with some of its most memorable characters. Guys like The Rock, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Mankind, Chris Jericho, the biggest ass kickers of a generation. Triple H is buried under a pile of people who are better than him. He needs to figure out a way to change the game. Because even though he's like a vicious psychopath, he's not quite as tough as the really tough guys. I think it's fair to describe him as a B-plus player. So what does he do? He finds a bunch of losers. He finds them on the side of the road, and they're just idiots. Oh, I'm Billy Gunn. I'm Mr. Ass. My thing is, I have a butt. Oh, I'm the Road Dogg. My thing is, I spell my name. And I'm X-Pac. My thing is, I'm X-Pac.
I'm X-Pac. My thing is, I'm X-Pac.
You guys seem great. In fact, why don't you all be in D-Generation X with me? The guys are like, titty, dick, sucker, vagina. We love D-Generation X. Triple H is like, yeah, you're my bodyguards now. He builds an army. He's turned what was a friggin' movement in wrestling into a group of stormtroopers who he pushes in front of him whenever a real fight comes around. But having an army isn't enough. To really secure a kingdom, you have to get the princess. So he gets Stephanie McMahon, the daughter of the owner of the company, kidnaps her, drugs her, and marries her while she's passed out. How do you marry someone without their consent? Shouldn't he go to jail for kidnapping a woman and drugging her? These are questions that you don't have to ask, because wrestling isn't real. Triple H repeatedly wins the title off guys who could kick his ass. The thing is, whenever people are about to beat him for the title, you've got this group of putties from Power Rangers and DX shirts jumping on the side of the ring, and if that doesn't work, he'll poke you in the eye or kick you in the balls or bully the referee. Yeah. And if that doesn't work, Triple H hits you in the face with a sledgehammer. DX, you all suck it, right? The audience is like, Triple H is like, why? They're like, because you're a coward and you can't fight for yourself. Triple H is like, but I got a sledgehammer. The audience is like,
Shouldn't you be in prison for hitting someone with a sledgehammer?
Triple H is like, I'm the best at wrestling. The audience is like, get the tomato!
Get the tomato!
Old Spice Gentleman Super Hydration Body Wash. Vanilla and shea. 24/7 moisture. Tomato!
Finally, Triple H is so paranoid about his own guys that he takes them out one by one and allies with Stephanie McMahon. Triple H is like, but I kidnapped you. You love me now? She's like, yeah, man, I've been super evil the whole time, basically. He's like, no way, that's awesome! DX is dead, but Triple H is now a corporate champion at the top of the company. What's important to remember here is that the way this guy originally got power was by saying, fuck you to authority. But he's so scared of losing that title. Now he's got it and he won't let go. In Triple H's mind, this object is everything that he isn't. He wants that power. He wants people to cheer him. He wants them to know he is the best. But he isn't.
Shawn Michaels returns.
Triple H is now being pursued by dozens of guys. Everyone's trying to make a name for themselves by taking out the champion. So Triple H does what he does best, builds an insulating shell around himself. finds this old guy, Ric Flair. His skin is basically leather. He's a disgusting old goober who yells woo. He's awesome. Just trust me, he's awesome. Sometimes when you describe something in wrestling, it doesn't sound awesome, but then when you see it, it's fuck it, it's Ric Flair. He's awesome. Then Triple H scouts out this total lunatic, snake-like psycho named Randy Orton. I'm a fucking snake. I like to hurt old people. Harry Potter. Triple H is like, this seems like a guy I could trust. The final brick in the wall is Batista, a ripped ass kicker who's more brawn than brains, and Triple H can order to destroy almost anyone on the roster. And for nearly 3 years, Triple H holds on to that title like Gollum with the fucking rings. He can't let it go. Because if you are about to pin Triple H, surprise, there's Ric Flair. Oh, turn around, it's Randy Orton. And then if you get through them, Batista will throw you off the surface of the earth and into space, and you'll hit the moon, you'll go through the moon, you'll go to space and die. That's real. That happened. From the beginning of this group called Evolution, there are little cracks. Randy Orton is a crazy person. Batista has a serious rage problem. And Ric Flair is old as fuck. And things get real hard when Shawn Michaels comes back. Hey, Triple H, it's me, Shawn Michaels. So happy to see you. Oh my God. Triple H is like, so happy to see you. I'm gonna fucking kill you. Get the fuck out of here. I'm in charge now. I'm important. Someone tell me I'm important. Someone tell me I'm as good as Shawn Michaels. For the better part of a year, Triple H beats the fuck out of Shawn Michaels, who's going for his title. And this is where things get really interesting. You know how I told you Triple H has this inferiority complex? Well, there's this guy shows up. This little Canadian guy. This guy is not a main eventer like Triple H and Shawn Michaels, but he wins a shot at the championship. Triple H can't believe this. Ignore him. When the time comes for our big match, Shawn Michaels, it's going to be you and me. This is destiny. Shawn Michaels is like, I mean, he did win the title shot. Triple H is like, but he's a little guy and we're big and strong. And at WrestleMania, Triple H's obsession with trying to beat Shawn Michaels costs him the title to Chris Benoit. And Triple H tries to can't get the title back. But you know who beats Chris Benoit? Randy Orton. Hey, Randy's so cool that you won the title, and I mentored you, and I helped you, and now you're gonna be champion. I'm gonna fucking kill you! I'm the best! Give me that title! Triple H wins the title back from Randy Orton. And it's at about this time that Batista wins a shot for the title. Triple H is like, hey, Batista, hey, buddy, you don't want to take a shot at the title, man. Well, you take a shot at the title with me. We're best friends. We're such good friends, Batista. Batista's like, you know, I watched this show, and it seems like whenever you are nervous about someone taking the title, you turn on people. You turn on your best friend. You had me beat up Randy Orton. I feel like you're probably going to turn on me soon. Triple H is like, no, but this is crazy. This is silly. Let's kill him. Oh, shit. Batista one-ups Triple H, takes that title, and rises to the top of the card.
Batista one-ups Triple H, becomes an actor, becomes Drax, makes millions of dollars in Marvel money. Who's the real winner?
Old man Ric Flair has a conversation with Triple H where Triple H is basically like, Batista's not better than me because he beat me. Randy Orton's not better than me because he beat the guy I couldn't beat. And Shawn Michaels isn't better than me because Ric Flair, say something. Tell me I'm good. Ric Flair is like, peace, dude. This is weird.
Chapter, whatever,
Triple H is like, audience, tell me I'm good. What do I need to do to make you love me? The audience says, well, we don't like John Cena. John Cena is a newer character at this time. He's basically Superman, and people hate him for all the reasons people hate Superman. He's bland. He wins all the time. He's just a goody two-shoes. The character never changes. He always does the same thing. He shrugs off beatdowns and smiles and laughs about it. He takes all of the stakes out of everything because he never fucking loses. Triple H says, well, I do have a sledgehammer. Triple H comes out like, hey, John Cena, you suck. I'm the best, right? Audience, tell me I'm better than Shawn Michaels. They're like, well, beat John Cena, we'll think about it. Triple H goes after Cena and he loses. Then Triple H and Shawn Michaels end up going after Cena at the same time, and they both lose. You can't beat Superman. But them hanging out a little bit makes Triple H like, hey, Shawn Michaels, we're both like older and like way more mature. And Shawn Michaels is like, yeah. Triple H is like, maybe like together we could be best friends again and like do it where we do the DX again. Shawn Michaels is like, I'm 45 years old. Triple H is like, yeah, but we're best friends. So out they come, but wrestling is rated PG now, which means they jump out like, poopy caca, fart. Triple H is having this moment where people are cheering for him, and that's when Shawn Michaels gets bored. You see, Shawn Michaels is reaching near the end of his career. He wants to do something no one else has ever done, and that's beat The Undertaker at WrestleMania.
The end of the road.
I see your face. Who is The Undertaker? Well, hold on to your suspension of disbelief, because it's about to take a fucking beating.
I like turtles.
The Undertaker is a wizard, a satanic magician, and no, I don't know why he's a wrestler. He was part of this cult when he was a little kid. They sacrificed these 3 little girls. Now he's got this creepy guy, Paul, with him. He has this intense relationship with his demon brother, Kane. It's all pretty fucking insane. And add to that, he commands a cult of hundreds of hooded figures.
You know it's fake, right?
What matters is that Undertaker has never been defeated at WrestleMania. Shawn Michaels is like, I think I can beat him. He couldn't. Shawn Michaels is like, damn it, I feel like I could really beat him if I just had one more chance, you know? Undertaker says, hey. Undertaker says, I will give you another match at next year's WrestleMania, but only if when you lose, you retire from wrestling forever. Shawn Michaels is like, I don't know if I should do that. What do you think, Triple H? Triple H is like, no, it would be so terrible if you left and never came back. That would be the worst. Oh my God. You should do it. You should do it. Why don't you do it? Don't be a pussy. You should do it. Do it. Do it, Shawn Michaels. Shawn Michaels is like, okay, sure. So Shawn Michaels loses to The Undertaker, is permanently retired. Poor Shawn Michaels.
It's my time. And my dick fell off. Don't get it wrong, I don't make me soft. Drinking champagne, baby.
Oh, boo-hoo, Shawn. You're gonna feel real stupid when I beat The Undertaker at WrestleMania. I'm wasted. Bad. And the important thing to remember about Triple H is that he views himself, when he looks in the mirror, as this warrior knight, Conan destroyer, super badass, unstoppable guy.
Normally, when I used to stream
the fact that he's actually
hours,
an insecure, cheating, undercutting, manipulative coward, he's kind of blind to. He can't see it. And that's why when The Undertaker beats him, all Triple H can think about is, but I still got some good hits in though, right? And everyone's like, sort of. Hey, stop acting like you beat me. Yeah, but I kinda did, sort of.
Kind of just running on caffeine.
No, you didn't. Yeah, but I hit you a bunch of times. That's not how wrestling works. You can't win, just, you lost.
Eventually, halfway through the stream, we're going to take a 10-minute break. We're gonna take several breaks through this stream. Don't think that we're just
you lost.
doing like
Admit that you lost.
one long giant
Fight me again then.
bada boomy.
No. You're not as good as Shawn Michaels. Bitch, I will fight you anywhere. I will fight you on the moon. It's going to be a Hell in the Cell match where I'm allowed to use any weapon I want, like sledgehammer. And the referee is going to be my best friend, Shawn Michaels. Shawn Michaels is like, well, chill it on the best friend. You chill it on the best friend. Triple H is like, you're my best friend. And with Shawn Michaels as the guest referee, access to any weapon he wants in a match that he chose, Triple H loses to The Undertaker. This is the end of an era. Triple H is so beaten up at the end of his match that he, Shawn Michaels, and The Undertaker walk out together in what should be a beautiful moment, the end of 3 careers. Instead, it's my time. Triple H uses the fact that he's married to the daughter of the owner of the company to secure a corporate position. That's right. The rebel, the barbarian ass kicker, the guy who could never be tamed. I am the ultimate destroyer, the one true diamond in this industry. I'm also a suit. I'm here to tell you that my wife says that you're all in big trouble. But this is almost the perfect position for him. No longer an active wrestler.
He is Hunter
Triple H
Hearst
is
Helmsley
closer to the
after all.
title than he'd
Perfect
be
position.
holding. See, he gets to choose who fights for it. And Triple H is so insecure and so obsessed with this title that he is constantly interfering with real wrestlers because he can't let it go. He never proved that he was good enough. So I'll tell you one last story. And it's about a guy named Daniel Bryan.
Blood on the Throne.
Daniel Bryan was this little scrappy, weird, vegan, sort of like almost hipster gnome who yells the word yes. People fucking love him. They love him so much. And you know what? I don't blame them. There's something great about Daniel Bryan. He's not the best actor, but sometimes in wrestling that doesn't matter. When you have enough heart and a weird enough face, you can reach the top of this industry. The fact that Daniel Bryan is competing against guys like Randy Orton, Triple H's former protege, and Batista, another Triple H creation, pisses Triple H off. Because when Triple H sees Daniel Bryan, he sees a guy who isn't good enough. When Triple H sees Daniel Bryan, he sees Triple H. Get the fuck out of here! You are not a commercial champion. You're an ugly little gnome, and I hate you, and you'll never get a title match. Triple H ends up repeatedly interfering in this guy's career, trying to shut him down.
This is bullshit! This is bullshit! Get the bricks!
He says, okay, you know what? At WrestleMania right now, the main event is Batista versus Randy Orton. But if you can beat me, the game, the King of Kings, the ass kicker, at WrestleMania, Daniel Bryan, you can be in the main event. You'll have to beat the 3 toughest guys in the company in one night. So fuck you. And Daniel Bryan does it. He beats Triple H real easy, then beats Orton and Batista. And an audience of 20,000 people yells, yes, 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 as Triple H responds by crying on the floor. The story goes on. That's the thing about wrestling. It doesn't end. But that's the thing about life, too. And yeah, I left stuff out, but you don't remember everything. Humans crave melodrama. They crave fiction. When you're sitting alone and texting, it's because you're bored. Our imagination is our greatest gift and our greatest curse. Because we're bored all the time. And that's what fiction does for us. It gives us a sort of simulator for bigger stories and bigger emotions. That's what Lord of the Rings is. That's what Phantom of the Opera is. That's what Goodfellas is. That's everything. It's us watching and feeling. The human capacity for empathy through imagination. That's why we have stories. Triple H is a great character in fiction, told over 2 decades. A snob who had a chip on his shoulder that he could never let go, and just wanted to be the best, but never could be that without cheating. Finally selling out to the point that if he can't be the champion, and that's what you need, man. That's what we all want. From Long John Silver to Perseus to Neo to Walter White. We love watching people grow, change, struggle. Good people, bad people, we don't care. We want to see it, man. We need entertainment and we need it now. And when you watch wrestling, that's what you get. Now don't get me wrong, a lot of wrestling sucks. But when it's good, it's fucking great. Wrestling is melodrama. Wrestling is mythology. Wrestling is action. Wrestling is comic books. The only thing wrestling isn't is wrestling.
That was Wrestling Isn't Wrestling by Max Landis. Joy is a skippable ad.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the 95th episode of Analyzing Evil, featuring Jimmy McGill, the man of many names, from Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad. A smooth-talking con man who got a little too big for his shoes, Jimmy McGill is a man who constantly flirts with evil, one whose push and pull relationship with the legitimate and illegitimate worlds slowly but surely destroys the lives of nearly everyone he comes in contact with, including himself. Now I know that Jimmy is nowhere near as evil as the heavy hitters in either of these series, but before you type up a storm decrying me for attaching Jimmy's name to an episode of Analyzing Evil, please stay your fingers and bear with me for a while before you give it your best. As while Jimmy isn't the devil incarnate, he's no saint either, and I encourage you to stick with me until the end before you make your final judgments on his character. With that in mind, in this video, we'll be exploring the life of Jimmy McGill from beginning to end, utilizing all the information we're given about him in both Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad to determine exactly how much evil we can attribute to this smooth-talking criminal lawyer. Now, without further ado, let's begin. James Jimmy McGill was born on November 12, 1960, to Charles and Ruth McGill in Cicero, Illinois, a suburb of Chicago, the younger brother of Charles McGill Jr. While growing up in Cicero, Jimmy would work at his family's corner store, helping his father clean, stock, and tend to the register, performing the run-of-the-mill duties that you'd expect a child to be assigned when contributing to their family's business. However, the innocent child helper that Jimmy was would change one fateful day when a con artist came into the store looking to con his father out of a quick buck, a scam that young Jimmy's keen eye immediately saw for what it was. When his father retreated to the back of the store to obtain the items he would need to help this stranger fix his supposedly broken-down vehicle, Jimmy was given the chance to call this man's bluff after he pulled out a clip full of money to buy 2 cartons of cigarettes when he had just so graciously been given money by Jimmy's father to aid in his supposed distress. Rather than crying out and alerting his dad in this situation, Jimmy instead chose to simply stare at this man as he gave him a lesson that would forever alter the course of Jimmy's life. Here, we see this man explain that there are wolves and sheep in the world, and he advises Jimmy to be a wolf. Advice which the young Jimmy took to heart, as we can see when he chooses not to tell his father the truth of what just happened in their store, the first manifestation of Slippin' Jimmy. From this point on, Jimmy would use this advice to full effect by slowly embezzling close to $14,000 from his family's store, something that his brother Chuck discovered one summer when he was balancing his family's books. A slow loss that Chuck the Younger claimed caused their store to go out of business. However, Jimmy blamed the store's closure on their father's generosity. And considering how much spite Chuck has for Jimmy, it might actually be a mixture of the two, as their father does seem to have been quite the generous man, which, while not being a bad thing, does tend to hamper one's ability to stay in business if they're willing to give it away for free. However, this could also be the first verifiable instance of Jimmy resorting to his preferred coping mechanism, denial and feigned ignorance, as Jimmy does remark to his friend Marco after they break into his family's store when he returns to Cicero later in life, that the reason his father lost the store was because he was soft and a bad businessman, which completely ignores the role Jimmy played in this scenario. Regardless of what truly caused the store to close, hampering your family's livelihood surely caused a heap of misery for his family, no matter whether or not it was a significant contributor to the closure of their store. Not long after the store's closure, Chuck Sr. would unfortunately pass away from what would appear to be a broken heart, and from here on out, Jimmy would begin to more fully develop his wolf side, embracing the role of Slippin' Jimmy, the teenage scam artist who would take advantage of people's negligence during the winter months by slipping on ice on their property, thereby forcing them into providing him with compensation, lest he call the police, which, while not being the worst thing a person could do, is certainly not good either, as defrauding people out of their hard-earned money is quite the insidious thing to do. In this endeavor, he was aided by a fellow practitioner of the art of the scam, Marco Pasternak, a man who would help elevate Jimmy from a simple personal injury scam artist to a glorified con man, and I'm sure that was a welcome change of pace, considering taking to the streets with his companion to weasel money out of every rube they could find with all manner of elaborate schemes is preferable to hurting yourself to make a living. This was Jimmy's life for a number of years, and it was a successful one at that. However, all of it would come crashing down when he felt the need to drunkenly take his anger out on Chet, a man who both had an affair with his first wife and owed Jimmy money, and he did so by giving him what is known as a Chicago sunroof, which is when you defecate into someone's car through their sunroof. And while this might be a hilarious way to get back at someone who wronged you, unfortunately for Jimmy, Chet's kids were sitting in the backseat of his car, and Chet had connections with the local prosecutors, which ended up landing Jimmy in jail on the charges of property damage, assault, and potential sexual misconduct. Luckily for Jimmy, he had an ace up his sleeve in the form of his brother Chuck, one of the greatest legal minds in the country, a man whose influence proved to be far greater than Chet's. Chuck managed to get the charges against Jimmy dropped on the condition that he turn his life around by coming with him back to Albuquerque, where Chuck would provide him with a legitimate job and the chance to escape the hole that he dug for himself by living the life of a con man. So, Jimmy took Chuck up on his offer, and over the course of 10 years, Jimmy would work tirelessly to prove to his brother that he wasn't a lost cause, and that he could truly change, finally doing so by putting himself through law school and acing the bar exam to become a lawyer. Now this is the undulating current that is the life of Jimmy McGill, as at this point, we've learned that Jimmy began on a high note as your average middle American kid prior to his lesson about wolves and sheep from a stranger. And then after reaching a low point with the Chicago sunroof, we find Jimmy slowly climbing back up to a level of respect that he might have had he not been exposed to the life of a con artist. Unfortunately, though, Jimmy's life remains one of undulation, and will continue to ride the wave that is Jimmy's life as we discuss his time as Jimmy McGill. But now that we've briefed ourselves on his backstory, let's discuss Jimmy's family relationships, as they've had great effect on what kind of man Jimmy becomes. Starting with his parents, we don't know too much about them, but in accordance with his father's generous spirit and his mother's apparent view that Jimmy was the greatest gift she had ever received, it would be reasonable to assume that Jimmy was babied to a certain extent and received preferential treatment when he was a child, which might explain how he was so easily able to embezzle thousands of dollars from his family's business without anyone aside from his brother batting an eye. I imagine that this ensured that whenever the young Jimmy did anything wrong, all he had to do was bat his eyes and apologize to get his parents to forgive him for what he did, which I'm sure served as one of several points of contention between Jimmy and his brother, a relationship that we'll move on to discuss now.
Meet Loom by Atlassian. Teams record and share videos with Loom to move work forward with fewer
that we'll move on to discuss now. Now, while they were kids, Chuck and Jimmy seemed to have a generally good relationship, as we see in a few flashbacks, and Chuck appears to have cared for Jimmy quite a bit when he was younger. However, because of Jimmy's position as mom and dad's favorite, over time, Chuck became jealous and began to resent his brother for being the favorite, even when he could have been considered the bad child, while Chuck, who was kind, intelligent, and devoted to his mother and father, was passed over in favor of his troublemaking brother. Judging by the scene we're given where Jimmy and Chuck are sitting beside their dying mother in the hospital, it would seem that this designation as the second son was so detrimental to Chuck's psyche that he was even unwilling to impart upon Jimmy the knowledge that with her dying breath, their mother asked for Jimmy. A moment that injured Chuck's already fragile ego because his mother didn't even realize that he was in the room when she passed. However, as I've already mentioned, this was not the first or last time that Chuck would gain fuel for the fire that was his quiet, and eventually not so quiet, resentment of his younger brother. And one of the best examples we're given of this feeling Chuck holds within him is a subtle one, the assistance he gives to Jimmy when he's in trouble for giving Chet his Chicago sunroof. Here, we learn that Chuck didn't come back to Cicero to save his younger brother of his own volition, but he did so at the behest of his mother, who I'm sure sang the same tired song that Chuck had been hearing his entire life, that being how poor innocent Jimmy had gotten himself in trouble again, and how he's a sweet boy who didn't mean any harm, and he really needs his brother to look out for him once again. Chuck, being the respectable, good-natured man he is, does not enjoy in the slightest his brother's constant troublemaking, even more so when you factor in his belief that it was Jimmy's embezzling that killed their father. But even though Chuck might hold quite the negative opinion of his younger brother, Jimmy is the exact opposite, as he has always looked up to Chuck as a positive force in his life that he only wishes he could emulate at the smallest level. So while Jimmy has never had the same inclination towards finding a respectable career path like his brother, he's always been caught between who he is and his desire to impress his brother and gain his approval, which invariably causes the two to be in a push and pull relationship where Chuck feels obligated to look after his brother because of his parents' love for him, while Jimmy feels ashamed and guilty for his criminal activity, which causes him to constantly seek approval from a man whose mind has already been set on condemning him as a worthless parasite that he's been saddled with till the end of his days. And because Jimmy actually genuinely loves his brother, he's also willing to sacrifice his own time to take care of Chuck once he develops his hypersensitivity to electromagnetism. Now, that isn't to say that at certain points, Chuck doesn't try to develop a better relationship with his brother, as we do get a flashback of Chuck reading a story to Jimmy when they were younger, and another flashback to after Jimmy passes the bar, where Chuck accompanies him, along with others from the HHM office, to a karaoke bar to celebrate his brother's success. And here, we get to see not just Chuck enjoying himself with his brother, but actually taking care of him when he's drunk and sleeping with him in his bed to make sure he's okay throughout the night. Which, along with his continued contact with his brother throughout his life, and despite what Chuck says later on about his feelings towards Jimmy, would indicate that Chuck does care for his brother beneath the animosity he's built up towards him. And with the information that we've covered here, we can now segue into our discussion of the next high point in Jimmy's life, and how quickly that high plummeted to a low, that being the moment just after he discovered that he passed the New Mexico bar exam. Jimmy, up to this point, had been working in the mailroom at HHM, and upon the discovery of his ascension to lawyer, his elation is met with the same joy from his coworkers, who promptly throw him a party in the mailroom to reward him for his efforts. This moment of extraordinary happiness is quickly shattered, however, when Howard Hamlin comes to join the party, bringing with him the news that Jimmy would not become one of the lucky few to be counted amongst the ranks of the lawyers working at HHM, informing him that the partners could not come to a definite agreement regarding Jimmy's employment as a lawyer at their firm. Blaming Howard for this, Jimmy vows to go his own way in spite of the odds stacked against him with his paltry experience and subpar degree from an online university, claiming that he'll prove himself to be a fine lawyer whose talents are far beyond what men like Howard Hamlin could ever hope to have. So while Jimmy, in this moment, is indeed at the highest point he's ever been regarding his future, he's also reached a low, in that he's now the proud owner of a law office, in a broom closet, within a nail salon, a lawyer that wears the cheapest suits imaginable, and drives a broken-down Suzuki Esteem. But still, at this point in time, Jimmy is a respectable member of society, who's well on his way to turning his life around, and proving to his brother that he's a changed man. And though it's not as glamorous a life as he'd like it to be, for some time after he's rejected by Howard Hamlin, Jimmy endeavors as a public defender, trying to establish a name for himself in the legal world, the slow path to recognition that, given enough time, might have given Jimmy the luxury and respect that he'd always dreamed of. However, the life of a respectable man is one that Jimmy would constantly struggle with, as temptation to return to his Slippin' Jimmy ways was always present in one form or another. And we get to see one such temptation present itself after Jimmy had a rough day at the courthouse and lost 2 potential clients to his lackluster public reputation. Here, 2 wannabe conmen, Cal and Lars Lindholm, attempt to run their scam on him by running a similar scam that Jimmy himself used to run when he was known as Slippin' Jimmy. Initially, Jimmy simply calls their bluff and chases them off. But after visiting Chuck and being reminded of the dire financial straits both he and his brother are in, Jimmy decides that it's time to return to his old Slippin' Jimmy ways. As is often the case with criminal endeavors, this doesn't go exactly as planned, and Jimmy almost finds himself dead in a ditch in the middle of the desert. But thankfully, the greatest talent that Jimmy has, his ability to convince others to do what he wants, no matter the odds stacked against him, only makes it so he and his two companions escape with a few mangled limbs. But even so, he's opened up a whole can of worms by falling into this situation, as after hearing about Jimmy and the twins' plot, Nacho decides to rip off the Kettlemans himself, a plan that Nacho initially attempts to get Jimmy in on, but is one that Jimmy realizes is a situation that could very well end in the Kettlemans being harmed or worse. So thankfully, he doesn't involve himself too much in this endeavor, but from this point on, a domino effect occurs wherein Jimmy begins trying to go his own way through all manner of trickery and deceit, like when he bought a billboard to advertise his expertise with an image of himself dressed like Howard Hamlin beside an identical logo to the one used by HHM with the bribe money he'd been given from the Kettlemans after he discovered their hideout. And he even manufactured fake heroism by paying one of the men working on removing the billboard once he loses a suit against Howard to put himself in a dangerous situation so Jimmy can rescue him in front of the media. But the icing on top of from him by depriving him of his newspaper, which caused Chuck to exit his home and suffer the effects of a supposed condition and get himself in trouble with the law. Though how much sympathy there is to be had for Chuck here might be little to none, considering how his character develops over time. Now, although these actions are quite shady, this does bring Jimmy the opportunity to do a significant amount of good while lining his own pockets and hopefully earning him a seat at the table at HHM at the same time. The revelation of the misdeeds of the Sandpiper Nursing Home Company, taking this information to his brother and then to Howard, Jimmy's moment of triumph is quickly swept from under him when Howard tells him that despite the enormous case that Jimmy has brought to HHM, he still isn't worthy of being a member of their firm, but he is worthy of their money, an offer which he hotly refuses due to his outrage. However, from this scenario, Jimmy unfortunately divines the truth of the matter, that being that it's not Howard serving as a roadblock to his membership at HHM, but his own brother. In a heated exchange at Chuck's home, Chuck finally tells Jimmy the truth, that he blocked his employment at his firm because he doesn't believe that Jimmy is a real lawyer, but a man who has no respect for the institution he holds more holy than any other, the law, and that he doesn't even deserve to breathe the same air as real lawyers like himself and Howard. This was obviously a crushing moment for Jimmy. And Howard. This was obviously a crushing moment for Jimmy, and after hosting a bingo event at Sandpiper, the following day, Jimmy suffers an immense amount of distress as he constantly draws the letter B from the pool, a pointed reminder of how the B relation in his life, his brother, had betrayed him more than he ever could have imagined. At a low point once again, Jimmy decides that this life of straight roads and constant struggle to prove himself to his brother isn't worth it, and is a betrayal of who he truly is. Slippin' Jimmy, the smooth-talking con artist who lived a merry life of drunken debauchery with his good friend Marco Pasternak in Cicero, Illinois. Heading back home, Jimmy once again returns to his nefarious ways and has the time of his life, operating in his comfort zone and sticking it to his brother in his own way. However, on the last night of his stay in Cicero, Marco unfortunately succumbs to whatever illness he had been displaying since Jimmy's return, stating to Jimmy with his dying breath that that was the best day of his life. The heartbreaking loss of a man that could be said to have been Jimmy's chosen brother, a loss of one brother to go along with the virtual loss of another. As he plays with the pinky ring of his lost friend outside the church where his funeral was being held, Jimmy receives a call from Kim, notifying him that he's been presented with a job offer from Davis in Maine, and that he needs to return immediately to have a meeting with them, an offer which he accepts. Now this is the second time that we see Jimmy's way of coping with loss in action, which again is to stuff it down and replace it with something else. As when Kim asks him if he got whatever it is he needed to get out of his system gone, Jimmy simply replies, "Yep, all gone." He chooses here to hide the tragedy he just experienced, rather than express his feelings in this moment, though in his own way, he does honor his friend by continuing to operate in the spirit of scamming, with his ring always on his finger. However, that still isn't really dealing with one's traumas in a healthy way. However, it should be noted that Jimmy does express his emotions in bursts of anger at several points in this series, which is a knee-jerk reaction to his pain that also serves as an incredibly unhealthy way to deal with his emotions. After returning from Cicero, Jimmy was now poised to enter a new high point in his never-ending cycle of undulation. However, once he met with Cliff Main, the ring on his finger reminded him of who he truly was. And after a polite declination of the position, he leaves the courthouse to breathe life into Slippin' Jimmy once again, vowing to Mike as he makes his escape that he'll never take the high road again, like he did when he stayed true to his promise to give the Kettlemans their money back after helping them through their legal troubles. This is essentially the beginning of the end for Jimmy McGill, and the beginning of the beginning of Saul Goodman, as from here, Jimmy proceeds to entangle himself in all manner of duplicitous situations, scamming people with Kim, taking on the Davis and Main job, and ruining his position purposefully once he again feels out of place working for a legitimate business, and of course, sabotaging his brother's work on the Mesa Verde case, a case that Kim had worked hard to obtain, one that Chuck and Howard stole from her, which began yet another domino effect, wherein Jimmy found himself mired in a battle with his brother as he tried to discover the truth of Jimmy's sabotage of his work, a war that's penultimate battle would involve the hospitalization of Chuck following his tussle with Lance at the copy store, and the instigation of a legal battle between Jimmy and Chuck when Chuck secretly recorded Jimmy confessing his falsification of Chuck's documents regarding the Mesa Verde case. The following struggle with Chuck would end in the revelation of his condition being entirely a figment of his imagination, and the subsequent effort on Chuck's part to discredit Jimmy in every way that he possibly could ended with Jimmy's suspension from practicing law for a year. In the meantime, Jimmy would labor to build an advertisement business due to his success with his ad campaign at Davis and Main, a field which he also struggled to find his footing in. Aside from getting back at Chuck by humiliating him, though, Jimmy was presented with the opportunity to harm him further when he was granted a meeting with the company who provided him with his malpractice insurance, a meeting where he was able to successfully get his brother's insurance taken away by mentioning his cognitive issues. But despite all this, Jimmy still loved Chuck as the brother he had looked up to his entire life, and he attempts to make amends with Chuck one final time at his home. However, Chuck is still as spiteful, vindictive, and jealous as he ever was, and in this final exchange, he claims that he never really cared all too much for Jimmy, refusing to acknowledge his role in their predicament, and instead casting his brother to the wayside, as if he were nothing but a nuisance that he was forced to deal with his entire life. Now, as we all know, Chuck chooses to kill himself following this altercation, and though Jimmy is partially responsible for Chuck's death, how responsible he is up for debate. When you consider that all the events leading up to Chuck's suicide involve Jimmy in one way or another, it's easy to place the blame on him for pushing his brother over the edge, and Jimmy acknowledges this in their final encounter. However, as Jimmy points out, Chuck is as much to blame for the battle between them as Jimmy is, as Chuck wasn't exactly a saint. Far from it, in fact. His deep-seated jealousy of Jimmy, combined with his distaste for the man he had become, made it so Chuck was sabotaging Jimmy at every turn. And had Chuck not been actively trying to undermine his brother's life, while he half-heartedly attempted to improve it, the problems between the two would have been non-existent. Yes, for quite some time, Jimmy was a scumbag, but that doesn't excuse the fact that Chuck was a poor sibling who couldn't even bring himself to assist his brother when he was trying to better his life, because he believed that Jimmy never would or could truly change.
I disagree.
And the fact that Chuck labels Jimmy as a person who destroys everything he touches certainly doesn't help either. So yes, Jimmy was heavily involved in the events leading up to Chuck's death, but when it comes down to it, Chuck is the architect of his own misery.
Black Friday football on 5 is back. The Bears.
In the events leading up to Chuck's death, but when it comes down to it, Chuck is the architect of his own misery, and I think it would be wrong to state that Jimmy was solely or even majorly responsible for his brother's suicide, as none of the things that he did to Chuck would have ever happened if Chuck hadn't instigated them in the first place. Though whether or not Jimmy knows that is also up for debate. Just like with Marco, Jimmy doesn't deal with Chuck's death in a healthy way at all, completely ignoring the pain I'm sure he was feeling here, in favor of pretending as if nothing at all is wrong, even going so far as to display overt happiness at his brother's passing. This happiness isn't solely a front, as I'm sure Jimmy was relieved to be rid of such a dampener on his life, especially when you consider how Chuck claimed that he essentially never loved Jimmy in their final encounter. But as I've said already, Jimmy genuinely loved and admired his brother, and his masking of his emotions here are just that, a mask. One that he uses to his benefit when he's having his reinstatement hearing. A moment that seems to be a final genuine acknowledgement of his emotions regarding his brother, but one that even Jimmy has fooled himself into believing was simply another scheme. Chuck's death seems to have been the excuse Jimmy was looking for to immerse himself more in the Saul Goodman persona, as even prior to his hearing, Jimmy had begun selling phones on the street to people desperately in need of burner phones that he acquired from his position at CC Mobile. And we even get to see slip-in Saul Goodman Jimmy playing the criminal game in a very effective way when he gets back at the young men who ripped him off, intimidating them in brutal fashion with Huel at his side to send a message to any other would-be opposition to his street business. But after he's been reinstated to the New Mexico bar, Jimmy is almost exclusively operating as Saul Goodman, attorney to the stars. Now, there have been a multitude of different crimes that Jimmy has committed that we've already discussed, as well as a few more minor ones that I haven't mentioned. And while they aren't exactly harmless, in that the majority of them involve defrauding people of their money or sabotaging his enemies, even his involvement in his brother's suicide pales in comparison to the greatest mistake Jimmy ever made, getting involved with the Salamancas, and at this time in his life, specifically Lalo Salamanca. Obviously, he already suffered personal danger at the hands of Tuco, but Saul's willingness to acquiesce to the demands of Lalo Salamanca put him and his wife through hell. First by forcing him into assisting them in springing Crazy 8 from police custody, then when he endured a traumatic experience whilst ascertaining the money Lalo needed for his bail, and finally, his role in the death of Howard Hamlin. Now Howard, like Chuck, was no saint, and he and Jimmy both had legitimate grievances with one another that left them both justified in their distaste of the other. However, Jimmy took it to a whole new level when he first laid Chuck's suicide on Howard's shoulders, and even more so when he began to harass him for offering him a pity position at HHM, and then to top it off, framing him as an abusive pervert and drug addict in order to obtain his Sandpiper money in a speedier manner. And though Howard is a self-righteous, pretentious D-bag, he didn't really deserve to be treated in this way, and after beating Howard down into utter submission, he decides to rightfully confront Jimmy at his home, where unfortunately lurked Lalo Salamanca, who promptly shot Howard in the head to make a point to Jimmy and Kim. Jimmy didn't pull the trigger of the gun that killed Howard Hamlin, but this is a classic case of the collateral damage that can occur when someone engages in criminal or reprehensible activity. As if Jimmy had never entertained the Salamancas or acted the way he did towards Howard, Howard would have never been in a situation where he could be shot by Lalo Salamanca. But there's another person who can also be held responsible here. Kim, Jimmy's longtime enabler. Kim is an interesting woman, as throughout this series, she constantly flirts with Jimmy's criminal tendencies. Off and on, we see her repulsed and intrigued by his behavior, but ultimately, she's more intrigued than repulsed, and you might be able to excuse her behavior as being the result of Jimmy's manipulation. However, there are several times throughout this series where Jimmy is actually the one who tries to turn his life around and stop defrauding others, but Kim encourages him to keep going, and this is the case with their final plot against Howard, as Kim was goading Jimmy the entire way, and she's just as culpable here as Jimmy is. Kim has been a pretty good influence on Jimmy throughout their time together, as she was there to encourage him to do his best in everything that he endeavored to accomplish. But when those labors involve the criminal, you reap what you sow.
This holiday season, my good friend gave to me
Pennsylvania lottery. Involve the criminal, you reap what you sow. And after suffering the loss of Howard in such a horrific way as a result of her own actions, Kim realizes the terrible pair that her and Jimmy make, a pair that will always relapse into deplorable behavior in order to get what they want. Jimmy, however, doesn't see it this way at all, and following the loss of both Howard and Kim, instead of taking a long hard look at the life he's lived thus far, he chooses to double down and fully embrace his new Saul Goodman persona. Getting his hands on the little black book owned by Dr. Caldera, Jimmy proceeds to build a legal criminal empire over the coming years, making for himself a lavish and tacky dwelling in an expansive mansion that he purchased with his Sandpiper money and the proceeds from his half-illicit business. Saul has set up quite the life for himself in the wake of his past life's destruction. This is another great example of Jimmy giving in to his unhealthy coping mechanism. As in true Jimmy fashion, he's completely ignored all the wrong he's done and the trauma he's experienced in favor of burying himself in another world. And while being able to move on from the negatives in your life is an admirable trait to have, it becomes less admirable when you learn nothing from those negatives and choose to pad them with even more negatives. A great example of this is how he treats Kim when she comes to serve him divorce papers. Here we see him acting incredibly nonchalant towards the woman who helped him build his life in Albuquerque. his one true friend and lover who was by his side during some of the most trying periods in his life, basically ignoring her as she fills out the divorce paperwork and admonishing her for not wanting to take her share of the Sandpiper money, afterwards telling her to have a nice life as he once again ignores her presence. A total callous dedication to his new life without so much as a thought given to the old. And now we have a handle on the real evil that comes from Jimmy's willingness to engage in criminal behavior, collateral damage, as although he's definitely committed his fair share of lesser evil acts himself, the real problem with Saul is his willingness to assist others in committing evil acts far greater than he himself could have ever conceived, which now brings us to his time serving as lawyer to Walter White. Now at this point in time, Jimmy McGill is essentially a thing of the past, and Saul Goodman reigns supreme. Bus benches, billboards, late-night TV ads, the bombastic and sleaze-ridden persona that is Saul Goodman is everywhere and has become the permanent face of Jimmy McGill. And owing to his endeavor to provide legal counsel to those less reputable members of society, we now find a man who, while still providing a certain amount of representation for innocent people, is now known as the lawyer who defends the guilty and helps them get away with their crimes. This is what brings Saul in contact with Walt through Jesse, who, as we see in Better Call Saul, was already intimately familiar with his business model. Taken out to the desert under the cover of night and made to stare at what might be a new grave in the middle of nowhere for him to rest in to replace the one Tuco would have dug for him years earlier, Saul enters into a business agreement with Walt and Jesse despite the circumstances he's faced with, a common theme for our criminal lawyer. From this point on, Saul assists Walt in taking his meth business to the next level, helping them with a moderate amount of legal trouble, like the defense of Badger, but he more so acts as a conduit between Walt and the illegitimate world, setting up the money laundering scheme through the donation website created by Walt Jr., orchestrating the wiretap on Walt's house to keep tabs on Skyler, having Francesca call Hank to get him off Walt and Jesse's trail, and setting up the false environmental report on Bogdan to pressure him into selling the Whites his car wash. But there are a few things that Saul helped Walt accomplish that go above and beyond a bit of scheming and plotting. The first of those things being his involvement in the injury of Ted. Now obviously no one intends. The fact does remain that Ted suffered a serious injury because of both Walt and Saul's influence. And though this occurrence is about 10% Saul's fault, it's still worth mentioning as being one of the ways in which his involvement in various situations, intentionally or unintentionally, causes harm to others. The second is his willingness to assist in the poisoning of Brock to get Jesse to turn against Gus. Again, Saul's involvement here is rather minimal, as all he did was instruct Huel to lift the rice and cigarette off of Jesse so Walt could do the rest of the dirty work. But even with Walt likely assuring him that no harm would come to Brock, the fact that Saul is willing to involve himself in the poisoning of a child in order to keep the Walter White cash cow mooing is a testament to how far he's willing to go in order to ensure a life of luxury for himself at the expense of others. But by far the worst thing Saul ever did was get involved with Walter White, as none of the things I've mentioned so far would have happened if he wasn't willing to not just enable Walt, but to encourage him into becoming the ruthless drug lord he eventually becomes. Initially, Saul helps Walt accomplish what he needs to accomplish, making enough money to keep his family provided for after his passing. But once Saul saw the enormous potential for Walt's product to become a dominant force in the illegal drug trade, and thus an extraordinary source of money for everyone involved, Saul goes from complicit skeevy lawyer to a bona fide cheerleader whose aim is to pressure Walt into continuing to cook for his own sake. Because of this distinction, you can essentially claim that Saul is in one way or another responsible for every crime Walt commits, and he says as much during his trial in the final episode of Better Call Saul, stating that without him, there never would have been a Walter White. And there's a lot of truth to that statement, as though Walt still would have come in contact with the malevolent force that kick-started his meth career, Gustavo Fring. Saul can be credited with instigating that relationship as well, a meeting that would send Walt further down the road of evil. And even after Gus is gone, and Walt has become the sole narcotic power in Albuquerque, Saul sticks by him and further assists him in building his criminal empire. Though by this point, Saul wasn't exactly operating of his own free will here, as Walt had become so massive and so terrifying that Saul had become quite afraid of going against Walt, and rightfully so. And once Walt's operation imploded, what was Saul's reward for his role in the creation of the Walter White drug empire? The utter destruction of his life. After Walt was found out by Hank, Saul was aware that it was only a matter of time before the authorities linked him back to Walt, and knowing that, he chooses to follow his compatriot into a proverbial hell by surrendering his previous life in favor of assuming an entirely new one to evade the authorities. A fall from the heights of flash and glory that was Saul Goodman to the mediocrity that is... A fall from the heights of flash and glory that was Saul Goodman to the mediocrity that is Cinnabon manager Gene Takovic. Steeped in regrets and self-loathing, Gene ekes out his meager existence simply for the sake of existing, laboring at his store only to return home at night and drink himself numb in front of his TV, occasionally revisiting his previous life by reminiscing while watching his old commercials. Not only is this an incredibly unfulfilling and misery-laden existence, but Gene is constantly looking over his shoulder for anyone who might remember the face of the legendary Saul Goodman, lawyer to the criminal and member of the FBI's most wanted list. But what's important here is the fact that Jimmy is never able to shed who he truly is, and when he's found out by Jeff, he offers to give him a crash course in criminality to get him off his back, which of course ends up being his reintroduction into the criminal lifestyle. From here, it's a quick descent back into scamming, as after Jimmy learns from Francesca that all of his assets have been seized by the government, even the hidden ones, he figures he now has nothing to lose and begins robbing people's homes with his cohorts after plying them with copious amounts of liquor, even going so far as to rob a man who he knows has cancer and nearly knocking him out with an urn once he wakes up while he's at his home. This ends rather quickly, though, once Jeff is arrested and Gene attempts to assure his mother Marion that the process for bailing someone out in Omaha is not like the one in Albuquerque, where Marion states that Jeff served time previously, a comment from Gene that sparks suspicion in Marion, one that leads her to searching for any trace of Gene on the internet using the laptop he had gifted her, which of course leads her to exposing Gene as Saul Goodman. And now Gene Takovic has once again become Saul Goodman, not just with his actions prior to his capture, but after the fact, as he defends himself as only Saul Goodman can, taking down the life sentence and then some that he was facing to a measly 7 years, a pittance considering the amount of time he was facing. However, Saul was undone by none other than Jimmy McGill, the man he had always been, that was buried beneath years of denial and misdeeds. A man who couldn't bear to betray the only woman he had ever loved to save his own skin, finally coming to terms with who he is and what he's done by accepting his regrets as an unfortunate truth of his existence, regrets that no matter how he might have tried to run from them, were always waiting to overtake him in the end. And at this rather noble end, who was Jimmy Saul Goodman Gene Takovic McGill? He was a bombastic, tenacious, cunning, charismatic, and charming man, one whose talents in the arts of negotiation and persuasion made it so that he was more than capable of selling water to a fish, or in his case, conning the unconnable, coercing the uncoercible, and outsmarting those who on the surface seemed to be far more intelligent than he. But that's the thing about Jimmy McGill. His intelligence is beyond what most people ever gave him credit for, and Jimmy is much to blame for that. Because of his parents' coddling and his unfortunate attachment to the seedier elements of society, Jimmy was put in a position where he could do no wrong in the eyes of his close relations, which allowed his darker tendencies to grow unchecked until they became an integral part of his person. And though a person's actions are their own, it's easy to see how the lax attitude of his parents towards his behavior shaped Jimmy into the man he eventually came to be. Had it not been for the grudging support of Chuck, Jimmy would have become a career criminal who likely would have been in and out of prison for the entirety of his life. But because of his relationship with his more respectable brother, Jimmy was given the ability to make something more of himself, and he certainly did. But all these elements that both influenced and made up Jimmy McGill contributed to the ebb and flow of Jimmy's life that sent him careening towards a path of self-destruction as he brought countless others down with him. Again, if Jimmy had stayed the course of Slippin' Jimmy back in Cicero, his life would have followed a similar course, but with the caveat that he would have likely caused far less harm than he did as Saul Goodman. The suicide of his brother, the indoctrination of Kim into his lifestyle, the death of Howard Hamlin, his many other lesser crimes, and of course, his role in facilitating all the misdeeds of Walter White would have never happened. And although all of these things are not completely Jimmy's fault, the fact remains that he played a big role in creating them. Chuck is as much to blame for his suicide as Jimmy is. Kim is an adult who made her own choices to engage in criminal behavior. The ordeal with Howard, well, Jimmy was mostly to blame for that one. But though Walter's rise to power was partially orchestrated by him, Walt would have still found another way to accomplish his nefarious goals if he hadn't met Jimmy. Regardless, Jimmy still played his part, and although Jimmy isn't directly responsible for much of the evil that he contributed to creating, just because you don't pull the trigger yourself doesn't mean you can't be held responsible for enabling the men who did. And because he was willing to ignore the suffering of others in favor of his own success, he caused an enormous amount of misery for who knows how many people over the course of his nefarious career. But here's the thing, Jimmy McGill wasn't necessarily an evil person. Rather, he was a man who was susceptible to the allure of one of the most powerful forces of evil in our world, greed. Everything that Jimmy McGill does throughout both of these series is fueled by greed, and this is best exemplified by the exchange we're given between Mike and him when they're making their way out of the Mexican desert. Here, Mike and Jimmy talk about what they would do if they could go back in time. Mike explains that he would return to the day he took his first bribe, undoing all the evil that had come from his willingness to entertain it, a heartwarming admonition of the regret he has for the life he's lived. But Jimmy, he states that he would go back in time to May 10th, 1965, the day Warren Buffett took over at Berkshire Hathaway, investing his half of the money left over from building the time machine in Berkshire. And when Mike replies by saying, "That's it, money," Jimmy replies in turn, "Of course, what else?" And again, here we get to see Jimmy refusing to acknowledge his pain and the pain he's caused others when Mike asks him at the end of this exchange if there's nothing he would change, choosing to ignore the matter as he had everything else that had caused him pain in his life. So yes, as we see many times throughout this series, Jimmy was actually quite the good man, but over time, through hardship and adversity, he became jaded, cynical, and ever more drawn to the darker aspects of himself as he refused to learn from his mistakes and deal with his traumas, further pushing him towards the part of him that could not resist the temptations of greed. Was Jimmy a bad person? No, he wasn't. I don't believe he ever set out to intentionally cause anyone misery, save for maybe on a petty level. He was simply a good man who was coddled, treated poorly, and made terrible decisions that were a result of everything that we've discussed so far, as well as the blinders placed upon him by his greed. But sometimes all it takes for good men to do bad things is to convince themselves that what they're doing is harmless, that all their misdeeds are nothing but an avenue for them to get ahead in a world that tries to keep you down. And while Jimmy McGill himself might not be evil, much of the actions he took were undoubtedly rooted in it, actions that ultimately resulted in the destruction of everything he once was and everything he could have been. Thank you all for tuning in to this episode of Analyzing Evil, and I hope...
Okay, so...
If you found this tape, it means that everyone is dead, or working at a different office. How did this happen? Well, I'll tell you. Buckle up, buckaroos. Today's lesson is the misfired launch of Fallout 76. June 2018. It began with everyone getting just a little hyped up.
Have we waited long enough, guys?
Oh, God, yes, we have, Todd.
I think we have.
Fallout 76, Bethesda's biggest game yet. My God, it was exciting. And they promised we'd know more at E3. E3 hype time. The press conference. 16 times the detail.
16 times the detail. All new rendering, lighting, and landscape technology.
4 times the map size.
It is 4 times the size of Fallout 4. And it's our biggest one yet.
My God, it was exciting. November 14th, 2018. The game goes live with a day one patch of 50 gigabytes. For fuck's sake, I'll see you tomorrow. But once that's downloaded, people start logging into the hellscape that is Fallout 76. And oh dear Lord, they never fix the bugs. And there are so many of them. Goodbye world, goodbye necks, goodbye body, goodbye heads, bugs, bugs, bugs everywhere. Server crashes, game crashes, old bugs imported from Fallout 4. Use more than one nuke at a time, server's dead. Textures far too texturous and all-consuming void. Error log 307. Can't pick up stuff, can't stop asserting dominance with a T-pose. Frame rate problems, screen tear problems, getting too swole, getting underneath the map, getting attacked by invisible enemies, spawning too many enemies.
It kind of speaks for itself.
Spawning too many god rays. Also, your camp resets after every session, and sometimes it goes underwater. Holotapes randomly play static, but too many holotapes mean none of them will play. Enemy AI is far more A than I. Animations are broken. Surprise! Floating objects and a traveling merchant. Just to name a few. Joseph Anderson has a great video that documents just the ones that he found personally. That video is 3 hours long. But it gets worse. Error CE348780 can corrupt your data and force you to reinstall the game and console operating system. A few PC players had their computers brick entirely. Also, when the date rolled over to the 1st of January 2019, the nukes in the game stopped working altogether. No one thought it prudent to program in other years in an always online game. And a few players were straight up logging into other people's accounts. This guy had a level 78 character that was randomly replaced with a level 8 character. Bethesda said they couldn't do anything about it. And many players are not thrilled with this game, and they want Bethesda to know that. And they want everyone else to know that too. But Bethesda owns the platform. Is Fallout 76 fun?
Yes, it is. Banter racism.
They had no direct outlet for their rage.
You have to go back.
The only solution was to put a torch to everything else. Reddit, Twitter, Bethesda's other games on Steam. The backlash was immense. But surely level heads would prevail. The reviewers would come out and say that the game isn't so bad. Oh dear Lord, they hated it. This is so sad. Despacito, play Country Roads.
It took them like 4 years to fix it.
This is so sad. Despacito, play Country Roads.
Almost heaven, West Virginia, Blue Ridge Mountains, Shenandoah River.
And the YouTube community had this to say.
It's really f***ing boring.
Could barely bring myself to play it in order to finish this review.
No one on staff wants to play any more of this video game. I'm not going to subject myself to another 20, 30 hours of this fucking mess. In short,
in this video, we will be covering all things World War II from...
Almost heaven, West Virginia, Blue Ridge Mountains, Shenandoah River.
And the YouTube community had this to say.
It's really f***ing boring.
Could barely bring myself to play it in order to finish this review.
No one on staff wants to play any more of this video game. I'm not going to subject myself to another 20, 30 hours of this fucking mess.
In short, Fallout 76 is morally, technically, and creatively bankrupt.
The mods on Bethesda forums were working overtime. The mods on Reddit almost gave up. Look, I'm not saying that some people didn't enjoy and have fun with this game. But what I am saying is that the Metacritic was really funny to read. So what happened? Well, it came out that development was hugely rushed. The deadlines were tight. Too tight. Plus, this wasn't Bethesda's A-team. It's actually a relatively inexperienced division based in Austin, and the scope of the game kept getting bigger.
We're gonna need distant weather systems.
Hey Todd, I stayed up all night and I just finished...
We're gonna need 16 times the detail.
Please, Todd, no more.
We're gonna need 4 times the size of Fallout 4.
That, and they were trying to patchwork the old Bethesda creation engine into a multiplayer framework. What else could you expect?
That's why I give my kids Fallout 76.
Now, Bethesda could tolerate the bugs and the bad reviews and the irate players, but what they couldn't tolerate were the exploits. Infinite inventory, infinite invisibility. The frame rate was tied to the game speed, so people were going a lot faster than they should. Server hopping for more items, infinite cache and infinite duplication, unlimited XP, unlimited nuking. The nuclear codes were unencrypted and you could wall clip into the quest room. And someone was given the curse of infinite invincibility. Naturally, this can really mess with other players' online experience. So Bethesda was ready, with the ban hammer
This just works.
and a blindfold to wildly flail around and take down anyone who happened by. But Bethesda wasn't satisfied with just banning people. No, they're a progressive company with big ideas. They wanted to give a road to redemption. So support sent out this email to players caught cheating. We would be willing to accept an essay on why the use of third-party cheat software may not I may give you your back. All of days the modern user will research. Exploit. In all of the games, every item is kept security at top because otherwise someone could just send an all item and it would absolutely shit. Of course, it was to deal with other than taking the best items in the game, then selling those items on a black market of sorts. At first, they tried the usual approach, banning people who had some of the best items in the game. You spent 700 hours just to get the best gun? Die, cheater. Next, they put in a system where players would get tagged if they ever entered the room, and they banned those players. That wasn't much better because people would just start using Smurf accounts. Get in quick with a level 1 account. Get all that good shit. Then get the fuck out. Then use a duplication glitch to get a ton more of those items. Then transfer that stuff to your main account and you're good to go. Bethesda then takes out this level 1 and calls it mission accomplished. And you've just beaten the game. So the problem continued. Bethesda is running out of ideas to solve it. There's a lot of speculation in the media and among players about how exactly people are getting in, but no one except for the exploiters knows for sure. That said, Bethesda needs to act fast before it ruins
you shouldn't have the fucking cheat room.
So they wrote another email and sent it out to
I don't know. Maybe you should have developed something other your game other than something in the fucking creation.
Unban you?
Can't. I don't know.
From you, the account will simply remain. It's not known whether this approach worked, but from what I've seen, it's still possible to get into the dev room.
Right. From what I've seen, it's still possible to this day.
Or NASCAR.
Still possible.
To the dev room. November 22nd, 2018. Just a week after the release, the game goes on discount. From $60 to $40, to $35, to $30. You can find it for $15 on eBay, and in Germany, they're straight up giving it for free when you buy a PlayStation controller. Also, some stores are just zip-tying it to other products. But to Bethesda, it's worth selling the thing at a price close to zero, because it brings people into the atomic shop, which is where the real margins are, and it inflates the poor sales figures. Let's have a look at those. The latest figures show 76 sold less than a sixth of what Fallout 4 did. Not good. There's also been a massive oversupply of hard copies. Although, what's the point of a hard copy when the thing is just a cardboard disc telling you to redeem an online code? And while sales are low, returns are high. Immediately upon release, people began asking Bethesda for a refund. 76 is not on Steam, it's on Bethesda's own platform, so they have all the control. If players only played the game for a few hours, then generally they'd get their money back. However, it came out that people were sometimes getting refunds after a full 24 hours of play. Quite generous, but then word about this spread to forums. Then to Reddit, and a post got 12,500 upvotes informing people that this made pretty much everyone eligible for a refund, and the comments told them exactly how to do it. Bethesda was flooded with requests for refunds. And their response? Shut it down, lads. No one gets a refund now. Everyone go home. Show's over. Robot customer service man, engage.
Customers who have downloaded the game are not eligible for a refund. We apologize for the inconvenience. Die.
A few things followed. First, people got mad. One hardcore gamer even trashed a GameStop for refusing his refund.
That video's fake.
Thank you for calling GameStop. This is Brian. How can I help you?
A bit of an overreaction, but probably also fake. Second, the media. And third, a class action lawsuit. their inconsistent refund policy and terms of service may not be strictly legal.
No.
November 27th, 2018. McGrathio and Rathod LLP filed a class action suit on behalf of customers. Media quickly picked up on that. Their main argument is that it's a sometimes unplayable game owing to its technical problems, then they're refusing refunds, and that Bethesda is engaged in a strategy to release it anyway and then slowly patch their way into a more playable state. Updates on this lawsuit are slow, so I'll keep you informed on the second channel. Ad time.
Look, there's a meteor headed straight to Earth. Oh my god. We must do something. Was anyone curious enough to read about it online? Not me. Not me either. Nope. Oh no. Now people think I'm dumb and I have died a virgin.
Don't let this happen to you. Get Curiosity Stream. It's a streaming platform with some of the best documentaries and non-fiction from around the world. Partial nudity? Maybe if you look hard enough. But more importantly, the most arousing thing of all, knowledge. Works for your Roku, Android, science, nature, history, tech, society. CuriosityStream.com/Internet Historian for unlimited access to the world's free top documentaries and non-fiction series. Use the promo code Internet Historian during the sign-up process to get the first 30 days free, then cancel any time. Wink. Please, look, I need sponsors. I bought a lifetime supply of toilet paper thinking I was saving money, but then I left it out in the rain and the crows got it, and now I'm back to square one. Please. CuriosityStream.com/Internet Historian. Ads over. Let's rewind a little bit. Fallout fans made their pre-orders, and the most dedicated pre-ordered the Power Armor Edition. Wow. It came with a helmet, box, map, army toys, and a genuine West Tech canvas bag. Fast forward to the release, and customers noticed that their precious bags, which are supposed to be made of the finest canvas in the land, look a bit different.
Bruh.
In fact, it looks like a carry bag the real bag should come in.
Bruh.
Did they really just advertise one thing and deliver another? You can't do that.
Wait,
so there
that's
was
illegal.
a surge of backlash, and people began emailing Bethesda, asking for refunds, asking for answers. By this point, customer service is absolutely over it. They are done with the facade, and they send this email in response.
Hello. We are sorry that you aren't happy with the bag. The bag shown in the media was a prototype and was too expensive to make. We aren't planning on doing anything about it.
Here's another 1st and 10.
An exceptional education with little...
So what about the Power Armor helmet?
That's the whole email. Staff at Bethesda aren't even hiding their contempt anymore. Naturally, the internet goes wild.
Are you fucking kidding me? Wow. Wow. Well, I got so mad, I shaved everything off my face.
Oh, it's the pronouns
Okay,
guy.
this is a bit of a PR
Fucking
nightmare. We have to quell the outrage.
pronouns!
What do we do? Well, we've got this in-game currency. Let's just give them the minimum amount of that. Fantastic idea. Hear ye, hear ye. Anyone who paid $200 to $300 for the Power Armor Edition is hereby entitled to $5 worth of in-game currency that you'll be able to spend with us.
Fucking
500 atoms? Fuck yeah. What are you going to do with your atoms? I'm going to buy 5/18 of the white paint version of the Power Armor. Whoa! What about you? Lightwood laminate, lightwood laminate, lightwood laminate. Fuck the bag. He's right. Fuck the bag. Lightwood laminate, lightwood laminate, lightwood laminate, lightwood laminate, lightwood. Of course, this was Bethesda's fantasy of what would happen. What really happened is further outrage, and even the media started piling on.
Almost heaven, West Virginia.
It even became part of that class action lawsuit from earlier. Bethesda put out a tweet apologizing for their curt customer service and gave a different excuse for why they were making bags. A shortage of material, apparently. That was quickly debunked. Because it turns out they did make the canvas bag.
Yes, they
gave them all out to influencers. Oh dear. It's not the same one, of course, but it's sourced from that ever-scarce material, canvas. But what's more amusing is that it turns out there is a canvas bag in the game. If you don the postman's outfit, which of course can be found at the Atom Shop, for 700 atoms. Ooh, just short. Well, the bleating from the online community continued, and Bethesda's lawyers realized there would be trouble, so they decided to capitulate. Alright, fine. We'll make you a precious fucking bag. If you want to claim it, you'll have to fill out this form with your name, personal details, address, etc., etc. And we'll ship out the bag to you in 4 to 6 months. But it doesn't quite end there. Because Bethesda is known for bugs, and of course their website is a buggy mess too. Turns out all of the customer support inquiries are unsecure and open to the public. In fact, people can open and close and change them at will, listed are details of full legal names, phone numbers, home addresses, and more. If you've requested your canvas bag, you've just been doxxed. Not knowing how to immediately fix the problem, Bethesda panics and temporarily shuts down the whole website. And that is the tale of the Duffel kerfuffle. How could this have been so difficult? They made one for New Vegas. One last piece of a rum drink. Nuka-Cola Dark. Pre-orders available in September.
How could this have
on
been so
November
difficult?
14th.
They literally did one for fucking New Vegas. But I digress.
But in return, you got a very cool booth.
Like,
a great conversation piece with the family over Thanksgiving. Or at least it would have been. November 14th came and went, and there was no rum. Okay. A week later on November 21st...
This whole game was just a fucking scam, but no one wants to
There's a
talk
delay.
about it.
Things aren't up to the usual Fallout standard, they say. The usual Fallout standard.
The usual Fallout standard.
All of this just works. Things aren't up to the usual Fallout standard. So we'll have it for you soon. No specific date given.
1 week later.
Nothing. Then on December 5th, another email. Good news. We start shipping on December 12th. It's been nearly 3 months since you pre-ordered, but as a show of good faith, we made this promotional video for you. And this is where things went from tardy to retardy. Right there. Did you catch that? That's just a regular industry bottle and a plastic shell. We paid $80 and waited a quarter of a year for a plastic shell? People were not happy. Look at that ratio. Nothing in the marketing said that it was a plastic shell. Super premium, we were promised. And the media agreed. People began canceling their orders. Silver Screen tries to convince people that it's not cheap and shitty. It actually costs us twice as much to make the plastic one than the glass one. Then what the fuck? We spent 100 hours coding the design. Convincing stuff. So it arrives, just a few days before Christmas. The rum is about the quality you'd expect.
Can I swear on this? It's my own show.
Worse is the design. The oversized lip means liquid can pour inside the shell.
Hard to pour because how they made this damn thing. Spilled like half the shot.
Very dribbly. So you're best off opening the whole thing up to prevent spilling. If you do that, there's a good chance that you'll snap the flimsy plastic. Any liquid will immediately ruin this cheap paper sticker. Some made their own at home and the quality was about on par. But look, if you do want a decent version of this product, there are reputable sellers of them. They're on Etsy. They're far cheaper, and they actually give a shit. Not gonna lie though, some of the memes that came out of this were pretty good.
I'm somebody with...
Yeah.
Though, some of the memes that came out of this were pretty good. Now, many claim that this was an honest mistake.
Sorry.
Or that customers were at fault for misinterpreting ambiguous marketing.
Works on contingency.
I disagree.
No, money
all of the marketing
down.
shows other glass items. All of the mock-ups show something more akin to frosted glass than plastic. They give plenty of descriptions of the product too, and not once do they mention plastic. And they were engaged in a bunch of other tomfuckery as well. Before the product was even available, they flooded their own product reviews with a bunch of 5 stars. This raised some eyebrows, and people on Reddit even called them out for it, so they deleted them. You can see all this activity on the Wayback Machine. Now, if they're happy to deceive people in this way, it seems silly to give them the benefit of the doubt about the glass. It's also worth quickly talking about the Bethesda merch store. Some of these items are pretty neat. That's cool. Good idea. I'd have that. Fallout 76 pant. Singular. But why is he so mad? The photography is all just slightly off. This gaudy jacket was mocked relentlessly on social media. But does the $76 and $276 really make it more immersive? And why did they just toss it on the ground? And it comes in this crumpled up toddler body bag. You're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars in merch and you don't have an eye on? Why is she wearing the size XXL? She's clearly not happy about it. But who looked at this and said, good job, print? Now that's surprising. And what the fuck? They made the bottle properly. Yeah, one of those, please, but bigger and brown. Is that so hard? Let's get back to the game. December 2018. There are 2 new patches released that caused quite a stir. The good. For PC, they included a number of quality of life improvements, including push to talk. But it also brought in field of view sliders. Hooray! Increased stash capacity from 400 pounds to 600 pounds, and a small buff to automatic weapons. Hooray! They decreased the carry weight of bobby pins so it no longer took up 10 to 20% of people's inventory.
I got a box of bobby pins the other week that said weigh these.
There were also upgrades to the camp that allowed for easier construction, and a bunch of bug fixes. Hooray! The bad. A whole bunch of unannounced stealth nerfs. They generally made the game grindier. Ammo production was decreased. Fusion cores burnt out faster. Legendary enemies spawned less frequently. On guard, I'll fuck you up. And the backlash was significant, because everybody knew why Bethesda was doing it. To encourage people to use the Atomic Shop. And let's talk briefly about that store. Some of the prices are outrageous. A Christmas tree for $12. A Santa outfit for $20. Blue and yellow paint for $18. Oh look, $3 for the same sweater vest and slacks item imported from Fallout 4. But the biggest offense of all was the holiday emote bundle. $24 for some Christmas-themed emotes. Twice the price of these games. The media agreed that these were egregious prices. But worse, they're engaged in some deceiving marketing practices too. Oh look, it's marked down half price. But it's not. It was released half price. They're artificially jacking up the price, only to then give it a fake limited time discount in order to create a sense of urgency. That's illegal, here in Australia at least, in Canada, and in the EU. Reddit quickly picked up on this and pointed it out. Bethesda reacted by scrapping the discount and just setting it as the always intended price. Okay, it's been about 25 minutes of whining now, so I'm just going to leave it here. I didn't even get a chance to touch on the new pay-to-win fiasco. The new camera item that lets you teleport dwindling player numbers. But on the flip side, they're also adding new content and improving the game over time. Heck, No Man's Sky was a surprising comeback. So, maybe Bethesda can do it too. But for now, Todd returns to cryostasis.
Resident secure.
Hiding in his bunker until the bombs of outrage stop falling.
Proceed.
And returning only when it's time to get our hopes up once again.
3, 2.
It's the final game, folks. This one wins the series.
Struck out with the cheap seats.
Everybody, today we're going to be talking about that time
that Henry Ford built his own country in the Amazon rainforest, and more specifically how that country became one of the most expensive and lethal disasters in industrial history. We're going to talk about how something that started out with most likely good intentions became such a monumental failure, and more specifically how a flagship of the American idea was unable to overcome nature and the culture surrounding it. So if that sounds interesting to you, stick around after the ad as we get into the downfall of Fordlandia, as well as the greater concept of man and industry versus human will and nature itself. But before you get your daily dose of existential dread, let's set the mood for that dread with today's sponsor, Galaxy Lamps. Galaxy Lamps allows you to turn any room you want into your own personal light show. The device, as you can see here, is very compact and comes with a 3-position stand so that you can place it on any wall or ceiling that you want. And with the integrated Galaxy Lamps app, you are able to customize specific colors as well as set times for them to cycle in and out and schedule times for the projector to turn on and off. You can also use the lamp with Amazon Alexa and Google Assistant, or if you want to keep it simple, there's a big button on the side that you can push to cycle through the different color options. I'm a fan of the Galaxy lamp because it lets you set the mood for any situation. If you're interested in a creepy, horror, mysterious setting, or a relaxing nature setting, or anything in between, the Galaxy lamp has you covered. And right now is the perfect time to get in on this offer, because if you go to the link in the description, you will be able to take part in Galaxy Lamp's Easter sale for 50% off. That is right. If you go to the link in the description until April the 19th, you will be able to get your Galaxy lamp for 50% off, plus another $10 off for orders above $50, $25 off for orders above $125, and $50 off for purchases over $200. That is all in addition to the Easter sale of half off, and if you are watching this after April 19th, then my normal link will be down there for 15% off. Still a great deal, but you cannot beat half off on the Galaxy lamps. Get in while you can. You don't want to miss out. Thank you all so much for watching the ad. Thank you so much to Galaxy Lamps for sponsoring this video. It really does mean the most. I hope you all check them out. Link is in the description, and we are back to the video. We're going to go ahead and get into it, but as always, thank you for watching. Henry Ford is a man who needs little to no introduction. His innovations such as Ford Motors and the assembly line led to the industrialization of not only America in the early 1900s, but the world at large. Ford's system of a 9-to-5 workday with decent pay, as well as rapid production of things like automobiles, meant that the workers could actually buy the products that they were building. This was a far cry from the 19th century ideas of there being distinct classes of citizens, where many feel that Henry Ford was the first to establish the middle or working class American culture, and Ford profited greatly from this, being one of the richest men alive in the 1920s. One of the ways that Ford managed to keep costs low and profits high was by owning the manufacturing rights of everything that was required in assembly. In other words, he didn't just own the factory where the cars were assembled. He owned the mills that would produce the steel, he owned the lumber yards that would produce the wood, and in the early 1920s he owned nearly every aspect of material needed to build his vehicles, save for one: rubber. Today, rubber production is often overlooked, as are things like metal and wood production, but in the 1920s, before the invention of synthetic rubber, it was a much more engaging process. Around the turn of the century, from the 1800s into the 1900s, rubber trees were exclusively found in the South American jungles. The process for extracting rubber is workers would walk into the jungle until they located a rubber tree, to which they would then cut a line into the tree itself, and then whenever they got to a point where latex began seeping out, they would place a spigot into the tree in order to tap it and drain the latex into a bucket. That latex was then taken home, where it would be boiled in a sort of kiln, and then these mounds of rubber would be sold to bidders by private farmers who were just walking and finding rubber trees in the middle of the jungle. Not only was this a very slow process, but it was also unreliable. If someone like Henry Ford wanted to reliably buy rubber, which mind you would require millions of pounds worth of rubber for all of the seals, hoses, and tires for his vehicles, then he would have to hope that thousands of farmers across the Amazon rainforest just so happen to have a good supply of rubber and haven't already sold that to anyone else. However, while again Brazil was for a time the only place in the world that one could get rubber because it was the only place that had rubber trees, in 1876 a man by the name of Henry Wickham, who does have a fantastic mustache, stole thousands of rubber tree seeds and brought them back to England. From there, England began to distribute them to their more tropical colonies, and after growing them in plantations for several years, became the #1 supplier of rubber. Because of this, England became the world's #1 distributor of rubber, while Brazil faded into obscurity as people quit purchasing from their local workers. Ford hated the British rubber trade because Britain had a monopoly on rubber and could pretty much charge whatever they want. Ford couldn't really do anything about it though, because unlike a steel mill, he can't just build a rubber tree plantation in the middle of Detroit if he decides he wants to make it himself. That was until one day when Henry Ford was having a conversation with his friend, President Teddy Roosevelt, who told Henry of his adventures to the Amazon rainforest and how he thinks it would be an excellent idea to begin producing rubber back in the country where rubber production started. And here we have the first mistake, as Ford consulted pretty much no one else and decided to spend all of his money on this massive rainforest production facility. Now it seems that the Brazilian government, as well as the local workers and journalists, were thrilled with the idea of Ford building a facility in the Amazon. See, the Brazilian government was also upset at the British rubber trade because it took all of the business out of Brazil. So they saw Ford's new construction project as a potential return to form. Ford sent some diplomats down to Brazil to make negotiations with the local government and eventually decided on purchasing 5,625 square miles of land for $125,000, or by today's standards, over $2 million. Now, while that may not sound like a lot for the amount of land being purchased, this was completely undeveloped jungle, and the government pretty much pulled a fast one on Ford and charged him way more than the land was actually worth. For example, Ford wanted to begin building immediately in 1926. However, what he did not know, and would have known if he consulted anyone who was actually from the region, the Tapajos River, which was the nearby river and the only means of transportation in or out of the region of land he just bought, was about to enter its dry season. And during the dry season, the river retracts so much that there's no means of getting supplies to the undeveloped land. This would also mean for the foreseeable future, Ford could only ship materials in and out for half of the year. Furthermore, his deal with the Brazilian government said that he could run the land with whatever regulations and rules he liked, as long as 9% of the profits went to the Brazilian government. Everyone around Ford, all of his advisors and family members, said that this was a terrible idea. Not only would so much need to be spent in order to build this facility that it would take decades for them to see a return on their investment, but Ford's plan was not only to build a factory in the middle of the jungle, but to build an entire city in the middle of the jungle. And that's where we get into the aspect of Fordlandia that, in my opinion, elevates it from a bad business venture into a historical marvel. And that is that Fordlandia was not just a proof of profit, but a proof of legacy. See, there's this thing seen with a lot of millionaires and billionaires throughout history, that whenever they've made their money and come to the end of their life, they begin to focus on how they'll be remembered instead of what they're doing right now. An example of this would be Walt Disney's Epcot, where during the end of his life, he too tried to build his own private city. Henry Ford grew up in a small American farming town, and he believed that that was key to the success he learned thereafter. And his plan for Fordlandia was to just take a copy of an idyllic United States Midwest town and throw it in the middle of the jungle. And then the workers of that facility would not only receive high wages, but also receive free health care at their own private hospital, free education for their children at their own supplied schools, as well as churches, restaurants, entertainment, and everything else that Ford saw fit. The management or staff of the facility would be American workers who go down to South America in order to run it, and then those doing manual labor would be local Brazilians. In other words, Ford had enough money, and the reason that he put away advice to not do this was because this wasn't just another profit venture for him. This was a form of idealist diplomacy. During a meeting with his high-ranking staff where he was urged to not go through with the concept of Fordlandia, Ford said, "We are not going to South America to make money. but to help develop that wonderful and fertile land. Ford thought that what was best for him would be best for everyone, and that all that they needed was a little nudge in the right direction. So how did that little nudge go? Well, let's find out. As mentioned earlier, one of Ford's contributions to the business world was the concept of the 9-to-5 workday. And while this concept may have worked in American industry, this was not the practice in Brazilian industry. See, in the Brazilian jungle, it's not uncommon for it to be around 110 degrees by noon. So in Brazil, it was common for workers to wake up very early at 4 or 5 in the morning, work until the sun got to its peak around 10, take a several-hour break throughout the day, then go back to work at 4 to finish up. This not only gave them a large break period in the middle of the day, but kept them from collapsing in the Amazon heat. Well, to Ford, this was completely unacceptable because, again, he's approaching a South American operation with a North American doctrine. Because of that, in 1926, whenever the jungle began to be physically cleared, the workers were working through the hottest parts of the day. This led to workers becoming incredibly weak, and people began catching illnesses such as malaria and yellow fever, as well as several accounts of workers just collapsing. Now, remember that detail I mentioned earlier about the water levels not allowing them to get equipment to the area? Well, because of this, the majority of the labor had to be done by hand, which caused its own problems. See, this is the Amazon rainforest, and the last thing you want to do is be sticking your hand at the base of trees, or into random leaves, or dirt piles, or whatever. Because of this, several people were dying before the facility's true production ever really began. People would reach under trees and be bit by pit vipers. There were several accounts of men running into swarms of hornets and being stung everywhere. Some accounts even said that men would lay their hand on the ground and immediately their entire arm would be covered in ants. And then these bites and blisters would break out from where they were ate up by them. Not only that, but the first Americans who came to the region were not acclimated to the region itself. As the land was being cleared, the first things that were built were the homes for the American workers. Most of these workers brought their families with them, and it was very common for children to become sick due to the new environment. And these homes, which were modeled exactly like American homes, did a horrible job at keeping out the wildlife. Several men had stories of waking up in the middle of the night and seeing vampire bats licking blood off of them. As a matter of fact, it was a reoccurring problem that jaguars were stealing babies out of their homes. And in one instance, a woman who again came from America to work at Fordlandia was killed while bathing in the river by a caiman. To give you an idea of how chaotic the first couple years of production were, the lead manager over all of this was a ship captain named Einar Oxholm. He was initially a ship captain who brought supplies to the region, and then I guess they just figured he was really good at being a captain, so they were like, hey, you want to also manage workers, production facility, assisted living, healthcare, and education? And he was like, I mean, I'm already here. In 1929, only a couple years after production had began, 3 of his children had died from fever, and his other child was stillborn. Overall, in 1930, when production actually started, between the workers who were clearing the grounds, as well as the American workers who died of illness and caimans and jaguars and everything else, over 90 people had already died. At this point, too much cost and time had been sunken into the production, and perhaps to Ford, something greater than cost was also at risk. A couple years earlier, in 1928, the water tower bearing the Ford logo was placed in the town. This was seen as a symbolic completion of the town, and Ford gave it the name of Fordlandia. The town itself was quite impressive. The town was not only able to house 10,000 people, but a few of the amenities there were a hospital, several schools, a library, a hotel, a swimming pool, a playground, a golf course, its own power plant, phone lines, sawmill, and a church. And all of these were fully staffed, mostly by American workers. A lot of workers at the time talked about how bizarre it was to essentially step out of the jungle and into a Midwest American town fully staffed by Americans, and then to move your entire family there and essentially exist as a U.S. citizen even for a short while in this kind of make-believe place. And perhaps this make-believe place could have been more like a fairy tale if it wasn't for Ford's insistence on proper living. See, in 1928, whenever the town was officially crowned, they planted the rubber trees and began hiring workers for the sawmill. See, it would take the trees a while to grow, so the idea was they could make money out of this sawmill selling wood from the Amazon up until it becomes time to actually start harvesting the rubber from the trees. Well, these workers who showed up to work at the sawmill were immediately greeted by a whole lot of new rules. See, it was true that Ford was paying very well. As a matter of fact, some reports say he was paying $5 an hour, which at the time was insane money. However, while that may be very lucrative in the United States, the Amazon rainforest isn't exactly a place of consumerism. So even if you made a ton of money, you couldn't buy more than the local market is willing to sell for American dollar. I say that now to give emphasis to how annoying the following rules are. For one, Ford was a firm believer in the idea of the strong, hard-willed American man. And because of that, he believed in putting away all vices. So because of that, alcohol and tobacco were completely banned from anywhere in Fordlandia. Prohibition was going on in the United States at the time, and Ford was a big fan of it, so he decided to apply that to this area of Fordlandia, even though alcohol wasn't outlawed in the rest of Brazil. While workers could move their family members into the houses of Fordlandia, you could not bring in a woman if you were not married to them. Houses were also frequently inspected by the managers in order to make sure that there was no contraband. Keep in mind, most of the Brazilians didn't speak English and most of the Americans didn't speak Portuguese. To combat this, just 5 miles down the Tapajos River was a location the workers had set up known as the Island of Innocence. This was just outside of the border of Fordlandia, so the staff couldn't really do anything about it. And on this Island of Innocence was a series of bars and brothels. And the only protest that the staff could give to workers is they put out a policy stating that venereal disease would not be covered in their healthcare plan. Ford also believed that the only right kind of entertainment was American entertainment. Because of that, things like soccer or football to the Brazilians was banned. Like, straight up, you just can't play soccer. I guess it wasn't apple pie enough for them. And keep in mind, this isn't just the workers this applies to. This applies to the wives as well as the children of the workers who just can't play soccer for whatever reason. So, okay, if you ban that, then what kind of entertainment do you have in order to replace it? Well, as mentioned earlier, there was a playground for the kids, a golf course, and a swimming pool. And that was it for the entertainment except for one thing, and that was a square dancing hall. And I'm not kidding, and I'm emphasizing this because this was something that Ford really pushed. Most likely because he met his wife at a square dancing hall, but also because he despised jazz music. So because of reasons like this, it wasn't just American culture being transported to the jungle, it was Ford's idealized representation of what American culture should be transplanted into the jungle. And believe it or not, groups of children who have never been to the United States and don't speak English aren't exactly big fans of square dancing. However, perhaps the most annoying detail of Ford's idealism was his diet plan. See, Ford was a vegetarian and one of the first proponents of clean eating, essentially just a diet of rice and vegetables, and that's like it. So he thought, well, this diet's great for me, it'll be great for the 10,000 Brazilians in the middle of the jungle. So workers who were used to eating their own meat were now forced to eat an entirely vegetarian diet. It should also be noted that the American managers who did not care for Ford's vegetarian ideas would ship in meat themselves in order to make things like steak and hamburgers. This created another level of disparity between the workers and the management, as the workers who have been forced to eat these vegetarian diets and not play soccer and square dance got to look over at these American managers who were eating hamburgers and probably smoking cigars and listening to the radio as well. One aspect that was interesting whenever Fordlandia was built was the idea that every worker would be treated as if they're at an American restaurant. In other words, there wasn't a line like a cafeteria that the workers would go to and then scoop their food as in most assembly lines. Instead, they would sit at tables and waiters would come to them, ask for their order, and then bring it out. Again, their options were like rice or celery, but still, it made them feel special. That was until in 1930 when they decided this was inefficient and switched over to the cafeteria line, which seems to be the final breaking point for a lot of people. Like, you know, obviously all these rules, random house inspections, regulations, and diet was bad enough to begin with, but at least they got some level of dignity whenever they sat down to eat, and now that was taken from them.
Yeah.
But at least they got some level of dignity whenever they sat down to eat, and now that was taken from them. Something else they all really hated was a time clock system where you would punch your card and clock in and clock out. Again, while this worked in American industry, the Brazilian workers hated the concept of walking to the punch-in desk and then going to the place they need to start working. This also compacted with the fact that a 9-to-5 job was typical of Brazilian workers. So all of these elements were at a breaking point. And keep in mind, no one has made any rubber out of this deal yet. But in 1930, in the cafeteria that used to be a restaurant, an argument started between one of the brick masons and the current manager. Now, I've seen conflicting reports on what the argument was specifically over. I saw some that said it was an argument over the workers not following their diet properly. I saw some that said they were going to cut wages from the workers because they were eating too much. But regardless of what the specifics were, everyone was so ready to start a fight over something, this seemed like a good thing to start it over. The shouting match kept escalating until eventually nearly all of the 3,000 workers were rioting within Fordlandia. Now, there was a previous sort of semi-riot that happened in 1928 whenever the workers weren't given proper food, but that was just more so like a strike for a couple days and then it subsided. This was a group of people who were angry and setting stuff on fire and breaking things. The first thing that they did was destroy the time clock punch-in system. And I just want to know how that conversation went, because someone convinced them that they need to leave the cafeteria. They destroyed parts of the sawmill. They destroyed parts of the rubber plant, which wasn't really running yet. They even started destroying several of their own houses. And all of the American staff freaked out and got on a boat to go hide and float out in the river while they just the mob saw the American chef and chased him into the woods where he was hiding for 4 days. And I can just imagine, like, this group of people so mad and upset at the management. And, you know, they're obviously upset over the diet that they have to eat. And I just imagine, like, a chef running out, and he's got, like, the stereotypical, like, giant chef hat and, like, the mustache and everything. And they're like, there he is, get him! And the workers who escaped on the boats called back to the home office in Detroit, and Detroit called the Brazilian government, and Brazil sent in the military to calm down the workers, and after a few days of breaking stuff, they eventually calmed down. After this event, a new manager was appointed by the name of Archibald Johnston, and supposedly he made things a little bit better. Like, he still enforced the diet and all that, but he convinced the staff to, like, show a couple movies in the completely abandoned square dancing hall from time to time. And, you know, maybe he even got a little crazy and let them kick around a soccer ball every now and then. But after the 1930 incident, which is referred to by locals as the Breaking Pan Revolt, things were pretty normal among the workers. But now, I know what you're thinking. What about the rubber? And that's a good question. What about the rubber? Well, remember how I mentioned earlier Britain had a monopoly on the rubber industry because they had set up all these plantations in their colonies? Well, Ford's management in the late 20s decided to plant these rubber trees in plantation rows. The idea being that's how crops are grown everywhere else in the world, so you might as well grow rubber trees the same way. The issue with that is that in the British colonies like Sri Lanka, where they were growing the rubber trees, there weren't any natural predators or diseases that could kill the trees, so it didn't matter how many you grow together. However, in the Brazilian forest, there were a ton of things that can kill rubber trees. Everything from a form of blight as well as caterpillars whose primary food source is rubber trees. Now, these things are all over the jungle, but they're normally not that big of a problem. That's because rubber trees are solitary. So if one tree gets infected with blight or caterpillars and that tree dies, it's probably fine because all the other trees are too far away to get infected themselves. Well, whenever you grow all of these trees right next to each other in a plantation, you're essentially making a giant hotbed for things like blight and caterpillars to grow in. Not to mention, rubber trees have very large root systems, and whenever you grow them next to each other, it diminishes their growth.
Yeah.
So for some reason that they couldn't figure out, but they would have if they asked literally anyone who knew what they were talking about, the trees were not growing as fast as they were supposed to be, and as soon as they sprouted leaves, they were killed by caterpillars or disease. The caterpillars even started to trick the workers. The caterpillars usually eat the leaves from the bottom, and the workers would pick them off and literally fill buckets full of them and then just burn the buckets. So the caterpillars adapted and started eating on top of the leaves. So whenever the workers looked up through the trees, they'd think the tree's fine, and then it would be dead a couple days later. So not only were the workers upset and things bad for the people living in Fordlandia, but the rubber wasn't even being produced. And that wasn't the only problems they had with rubber production, because as soon as they started to harvest it, workers routinely got sick and just passed out. One reason for this was, again, the whole 9-to-5 workday, and they had to be out there in 110-degree weather. Which also, side note, the way the latex from the rubber trees pour out is whenever they're mildly cool, it just flows. But as the temperature gets too hot, they kind of inflate and crowd up inside of the system of the tree itself. So not only were the workers getting too hot in the middle of the day, the tree was literally too hot to let out the rubber. And the other reason workers were passing out is because Ford decided that they needed to take all of the modern vaccines in the US and make the Brazilian workers take every single one of them all at once. Again, while this may have had good intentions, taking people who have never taken any kind of medication in their life and making them take like 12 vaccines at once was not a good idea. I'm not sure how many people necessarily died from that, but the hospital beds were routinely full around this time. Eventually, Ford broke down and hired a botanist by the name of James Weir. James said that what effectively happened at Fordlandia is they had accidentally turned the entire country into a petri dish for blight. Because at this point, everything was so infected by the trees being grown close together that it doesn't matter what you grow, it's going to die in a couple years anyway. His recommendation was that they needed to scrap production on that plot of land and move it to another plot down the river known as Belterra. Also, no one liked James, apparently. I don't know if he was annoying or the workers were annoying. And then a year later in 1937, without telling anyone, he got on a boat and never came back. While they did begin the rubber tree production at Belterra, again, it takes a few years for the trees to even grow enough that you can harvest the latex from them. By the time they were ready to harvest, it was 1941 and America was about to enter World War II. And at this time, Fordlandia as well as Belterra became a station for American soldiers. Little to any latex was harvested as resources were being put towards the war effort. Also around this time, synthetic rubber was becoming more popular than naturally sourced rubber, just because it's easier to make and doesn't require, a jungle country to do it. So demand for the trees at Belterra were low to begin with. Near the end of Ford's life in 1945, he passed off the company and the majority of its assets to his grandson, Henry Ford II. Henry Ford II began by selling off a majority of the company's assets that were no longer making a profit. And the first of these to go, as you could imagine, was Fordlandia, which he sold back to the Brazilian government for $250,000. And while that is a profit of $125,000 for the price they originally paid for it, that price they originally paid was for completely undeveloped jungle. Ford had spent nearly $20 million on the construction of Fordlandia, which, adjusted by today's standards due to inflation, is closer to $500 million. And while that's a massive money loss, as I mentioned earlier, Ford is near the end of his life at this point and isn't looking to make more money. The deeper loss for Ford was the lack of furthering the American idea. And as Ford believed at the end of his life, you can't culture something that doesn't want to be cultured. When in reality, it's just that you can't culture something that already has a culture. And as he should have recognized at this point, you can't grow something where it's already growing. It would be like starting a tree farm in the middle of the jungle. Henry Ford died 2 years after the selling of Fordlandia in 1947, never having actually visited the land in his entire life. While being what is undoubtedly the largest blunder of his career, it is largely forgotten to history. But to me, the most interesting part of Fordlandia is not the failure that it represents, but instead the lesson that it's created. The city of Fordlandia still stands to this day, and while the majority of the structures have been overrun by nature, the town still hosts a population of around 3,000 people. The land has spawned a new industry, an industry of tourism, as hotel owners and guides give tours of Henry Ford's decrepit city. It's so fascinating to me seeing the remnants of something that was so determined to beat nature at its own game, now years later, after everyone has left, being overcome by that same nature. The water tower is still there, although the Ford logo has long faded to the degree that you would never know it was there unless someone told you otherwise. And to me, that is the best representation of what Fordlandia is. A monument that, yes, still exists, but it's a monument to something different than what was originally intended. And I think it's pretty cool, and hopefully you think it's cool too. And if you made it this far into the video, I just want to say thank you for watching. I love weird stories like this about just this super millionaire rich guy built a giant cityscape in the middle of the jungle, and it fell apart, and now it's like half abandoned, half a tourist attraction. And that's my cup of tea. That's the kind of stuff I'm here to talk about. Thank you again. Thank you for watching. Thank you so much to my subscribers. We're at 1.25 million. That is another 250,000.
Subscribe to Wendigoon. That was the downfall of Henry Ford's Fordlandia. And now, the history of the world according to Ancient Aliens. Oh, stupid ad.
There are questions about the universe. Are we alone? How were the pyramids truly built? What are they keeping secret in Area 51? So many questions, and Ancient Aliens has none of these answers.
Some of the extraterrestrials, they had sex with wonderful earthly females.
Yes, it's 2021, and I'm talking about Ancient Aliens 10 years after the joke died. We all collectively agreed as a society that this show was the equivalent of your drunk uncle ranting during Thanksgiving dinner. We moved on as a species, hand in hand agreeing to forget this show existed. So how come it's still airing new episodes after 16 seasons?
21
Who is still
now,
watching
baby.
this? How does this have enough content to discuss aliens that are ancient for almost 200 episodes? And we all know the hot takes the series is famous for.
Did ancient aliens using anti-gravity and sonic levitation technology help early humans build the ancient wonders of the world? Moses and the Israelites acquired a supernatural source of energy at Mount Sinai. They did so in a way that was designed to tap into the Earth's natural energy.
And these are not simply one-offs or suggestions. Every implied theory, every question, might as well be replaced with, yes, this did actually happen. It's like me saying there could be tiny pink goblins underneath my bed. Mainstream scientists say that goblins don't unplug my phone charger during the night, but my niche community of goblin enthusiasts think otherwise. And here's the evidence. Instead of goblins, these chuckleheads say aliens. It's a secret lore spanning the entire history of the Earth that only these ancient astronaut theorists have uncovered. So what is this forbidden knowledge when summarized in a neat package? The real history that only these fantastic men have pieced together. I had to know, and I knew others needed to know as well. So I strapped myself in and watched every single Ancient Aliens episode, taking notes along the way to piece together a timeline of the world that this show believes actually happened. So prepare yourself, as you may not look at the universe in the same way again. You know, despite watching every single episode, I still don't know how all of this started. And for that, we have Knowing Better, one of the first experts in this field.
Ancient alien or ancient astronaut theory didn't really become a thing until Eric von Daniken's book, Chariots of the Gods, which came out in 1968.
Yep.
And it really took off after the documentary in 1970. While studying the Bible at his Christian boarding school, Daniken noticed that some of the prophet's heavenly visits could be misinterpretations of extraterrestrial encounters. With that in mind, he started looking at other mythologies. Rather quickly, he noticed that the Sumerians, Hindus, Chinese, and even the Aztecs had similar stories. And this alien intervention explained a lot about their culture. Why does every civilization have a flood myth and tales about dragons and giants? Why did they all build pyramids? And how could these primitive people possibly know more about the stars than the Europeans? I'm not saying they learned it from aliens, but they must have learned it from somewhere.
So now you know what we're dealing with. A very sane and reasonable alternative to mainstream history and science, and religion, and reason, is what a mainstream historian would say, but here, we're all ancient astronaut theorists. So where to begin? It's simple. It all began 450,000 years ago. Aliens came across Earth and discovered Neanderthals, along with the other Homo species. Earth was the prized planet. Not only was it rich in resources such as water, but also with gold. Gold is valuable, you know, and the aliens wanted it. But what to do? It's not like they traveled across dimensions or the galaxy and have the ability to just strip mine the planet.
No, you silly livers! No!
They have a better idea. Create an artificial slave species in their image. The first two humans were placed into what we would call the Garden of Eden, but really this was a genetic playground for the aliens. Yet not all was well. Some aliens wished to give humans intelligence, and this was interpreted as the snake in the garden. This started a civil war within the alien civilization, one which humans interpreted as a war between good and evil across all cultures. This was depicted in the Hindu scripts or in the Bible. Satan was actually a roguelike alien who gave humans the first spark of true intelligence.
And this isn't just Satan. We see the same story repeated across religions. There are numerous examples of higher powers giving mankind some knowledge or tool they weren't supposed to have. Remember Prometheus giving humanity the gift of fire? It's also a common theme in mythology for the gods to split into factions over what knowledge humans should or shouldn't have, or alien factions in this case.
Yes. Humans were just left alone during this war and bred with other hominid species. This mixing with ape genes was the original sin of the human race, and aliens struck early humanity down in punishment. The other hominids were destroyed as the aliens decided to wipe out the world of impure human species, which was also known as the Great Flood. Noah, being half alien, was deemed worthy to continue the human species by the aliens, bringing 2 of every animal in a spaceship to survive until the destruction was over. After this, humanity was restarted in ancient Sumeria, where the first civilization was built. It was here that the aliens ruled as god kings, either instructing kings to rule by their hand or outright ruling themselves. The humans had no capacity to understand what they were witnessing. The technology was just so advanced, outside of their comprehension, they could only describe such alien feats as the power of gods. Humans were created as a slave race. Even though they had intelligence, they had no control of themselves. Every invention, every single action taken in the growth of civilization was taught by some great outside force. After this origin for humanity, mankind settled down into various civilizations across the world. We now have the ancient aliens' Age of Heroes. You know a mythology? You know a hero? It's all of them.
Aliens.
Every tale of Hercules, Gilgamesh, Beowulf, Chinese dragon gods, and even Aztec Quetzalcoatl. It's all real. Your values may be shaken or destroyed, but that's okay. They should be. Ancient Aliens is a staunchly atheist show after all. There has no time for evidence that isn't based on science or logic.
Is it possible by reaching
an atheist show that believes all the gods are aliens?
Extraterrestrial intervention in the construction and placement of these incredible structures to create a great
I shit you not.
A great flood.
Humans simply couldn't understand what technology they were seeing, and so they worshipped their alien overlords as gods. This logic transfers to every single religion. For the Greeks and Romans, they would be living on Mount Olympus. Zeus himself was leader of the aliens with his spaceship plopped on top of the mountain, his massive energy weapon, misthought of as a lightning bolt. Egyptian gods were alien experiments, and Egyptian pharaohs may have been aliens themselves. Look at that head. No refuting that. Even Yahweh, heaven, hell, angels, demons, it's all aliens. The aliens wouldn't stop right there, though. This was the age of heroes, after all. And what were the heroes of old mythology? Half man, half god.
Poseidon fell in love with a beautiful human girl, and he made her pregnant.
Aliens bred with human women. And yes, this does include the Virgin Mary. Fucking hell. Aliens overrule all human societies across the ancient world, including Atlantis, which was a real place. Aliens come up from the ground and holes between dimensions, teaching humans how to build anything. Buildings, stone monuments, dirt mounds, and most importantly, pyramids. But why? Why would an intergalactic alien civilization be interested in humans building temples? Well, ancient astronaut theorists have many theories. First, aliens wanted to prop humanity up, and the best way to improve them is to teach them how to build monuments, either by giving them the knowledge of how to do so, or building the monuments themselves. The second is for blood sacrifice. Why were so many ancient civilizations into sacrificing for their gods? It's simple. The gods told them to. They wanted human blood. The third is to have every monument on Earth be specifically built on areas of geomagnetic significance. As you see, the entire globe has a secret geomagnetic grid that, if harnessed, can be used by the aliens to either fuel their space empire or simply to travel across the globe faster. Yeah.
Through energy that might have been given to us by an alien.
These brick and stone structures have the ability to manipulate magnetic fields and even gravity in such a way that it powers and benefits alien civilizations. Humans never actually built anything of their own will. Humanity does not have the agency nor intelligence to do anything.
Okay, humans did do things of their own free will. They just received occasional guidance from extraterrestrial powers to guide humanity on its path. A little intergalactic inspiration never hurt anybody.
The wheel, aqueducts, smelting of steel for swords, even language itself, all were taught by aliens for reasons. Reasons outside our puny little minds. It's all a part of the plan. After all of the creation and sexy times were over, the aliens were content in what they had done. They plopped humans into the world and left humans alone to continue on by themselves. Their extraterrestrial influence and monuments left to be misinterpreted by mainstream historians who believed ancient people could actually construct pyramids by themselves. Thus, the history of ancient aliens comes to an end. The ancient astronaut theory in a nutshell.
Damn it.
Wait, there's how many more seasons?
20.
The first century comes around and aliens are still on Earth. Eventually, the old gods leave and the new gods arrive. The aliens have been meddling in the Middle East for some time. Which acts as a portal with aliens. And in this region of the world, it's going to be quite important in the coming centuries. But what changes this? Constantine saw a cross in the sky, and after winning a battle, Christianity was legalized in the empire. But was that really a cross? Oh, you know what it is. Aliens stay around to dabble and influence wherever they feel like. A city in India is nuked off the map by aliens. Muhammad's journey to Jerusalem was just a little thing for fun. Joan of Arc meets with an alien who gives her a sword and tells her to go defend France against the English. And for the English, King Arthur, who was a real human being, not only was able to pull the sword from the stone because of alien biometric technology, but he was even helped out by the Lady in the Lake, or Alien of the Lake, who handed him Excalibur, a high-tech alien weapon. Other than appearing as brief religious images, aliens didn't really do much on the record for about 1,500 years, mostly just overseeing the great job humanity was doing with those Mongol invasions, the Viking raids, and the Black Plague. They just do little things throughout that time to continue altering humanity.
The Black Plague in particular was engineered by an extraterrestrial we know as the Grim Reaper. In every depiction of the plague we can find, there's a cloaked figure floating above all the dying humans. This wasn't the angel of death, this was an alien being.
Thank you. It's kind of like when you're in a SimCity game and just want to add some natural disasters to mix stuff up.
All the time
that was
tweaking,
until
bro.
Da Vinci.
Oh my God.
That's right. The Renaissance, the resurgence of culture long lost in Europe. Aliens did that, reintroducing technology or new technology directly into the head of Leonardo da Vinci and the great thinkers of the Renaissance. They gave him ideas of medicine, and even this tank thing that just so happens to look like something else. Christopher Columbus sees a glimpse of an alien ship while sailing to the New World, and we all know how influential the aliens were in the Americas. All the pre-Columbian civilizations of the Americas have been interacting with aliens for centuries. But we're not talking about America, we're talking about America.
If you want to go to college, then this is the...
Talking about America, we're talking about America. That's right, the founders knew aliens existed too. Jefferson, Washington, they all knew. They even put an intergalactic symbol of peace in Washington, D.C. to prove our alliance with our alien overlords. You really thought aliens were done altering our planet? We're just in time for the Industrial Revolution. It did happen pretty fast. The aliens were planting some pretty naughty ideas of the combustion engine and electricity. The only way us modern humans would ever know how to do anything is by alien intervention. Hell, the aliens even go to the Wild West to be seen by cowboys. Maybe even meet them.
For clarification, Ancient Aliens, like any educational content, must occasionally require sponsors to keep the lights on. In one episode, it's sponsored by the hit 2011 film, Cowboys and Aliens. One can only imagine what it's like to shamelessly promote a product while also theorizing outlandish history.
Thank you, Context Dizzy, thank you. Unrelated, this video was sponsored by NordVPN. Oh no, it's the ETIP Stealers, an elite group of underground super hackers funded and supported by aliens, and they're coming for your internet information. That one search you did using the incognito tab, don't think they didn't see that. But you can save yourself embarrassment and a terrible intergalactic fate by having NordVPN as a part of your defense. It protects your IP address anywhere you go, so your consequences can't be traced back to you. One day you might be from France, and another from Japan. There are over 5,400 plus servers in 59 countries for you to use. Sure, Japanese Netflix is great.
I love anime!
But have you seen Alien Netflix? They implemented 4D technologies so you can get that full experience. If you want to secure your internet today, NordVPN has a special offer. By clicking the link in the description, nordvpn.com/althis, and use the code ALTHIS, you get a 2-year plan plus 1 additional month with a huge discount. And if you're on the edge, it's risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. Those aliens could have stopped Jeff Goldblum from finding their IP address. If they had Nord, he never would have seen their online activity. But alas, they chose not to take this offer. And look what happened. Go to nordvpn.com/allhist and use allhist to get a 2-year plan plus 1 additional month at a huge discount. There's no risk to signing up, but there is to looking away, accepting that somewhere, somehow, an alien knows what you just looked up, and he is judging you.
Gotta get a win.
Wow, those last 19 centuries sure were fun. I wonder what the next century will bring.
Is it possible that the Nazis perfected these things? Or is it possible that the aliens looked like Nazis in uniforms? How bizarre would that be?
Alright, I see where this is going. I think you get the shtick by now. Aliens did everything. Just everything. Any important influential thing that your average 7th grader would know about, the aliens did it. By the 20th century, they not only had met with Nazis and perhaps taught them to create a portal between time and space, but they also taught humans how to build nuclear weapons, even though they warned humans a decade later not to use nuclear weapons. Name any event, any situation, any person or place ever, and it was involved with aliens. The Spanish flu, aliens. Any US president, they all know. Antarctica has a hole in the middle of it that houses an alien civilization. I watched 16 seasons of this show just for this bit, and you know what? It wasn't worth it. I wanted to uncover every wacky claim, every bizarre take, and after pulling back that curtain, you know what I found? Nothing. The most generic idea you have of ancient aliens without watching a full season is that they claim anything and everything is involved with aliens. It just takes a history book or a religious book and scratches out key figures with aliens. And that's the point. There's a reason why Ancient Aliens is still on the air after 16 seasons. All they have to do is simply look back on anything that has ever happened and simply copy-paste E.T. into the mix. You do this for 10 episodes a pop, and you never have to worry about content a day in your life. And even with literally everything at their fingertips, the entire series probably only focuses on like 30 claims. In just the first 3 seasons alone, the Bermuda Triangle is brought up 10 times. And it's not just in passing. They repeat full segments with a reworded script and different footage. They don't just plagiarize history, they plagiarize themselves.
Okay, that's not fair. Ancient Aliens explores many different angles. Take the Ark of the Covenant. Was it a communications device so Moses could contact God? Was it a food or mana source? What about a bomb? The stories say it was radioactive. It could be any of these things, and we discuss those possibilities in multiple different episodes.
Oh, you're still here. Well, that's a little awkward. Okay, well, even with that said, that just sounds like an excuse to reuse old content.
We just like to explore all of the possibilities for each topic.
Ah, yes. Topics like gods and aliens, angels and aliens, aliens and monsters, aliens and sacred places, aliens and deadly cults, aliens, gods and heroes, aliens and the creation of man, the Viking gods, magic of the gods, the Satan conspiracy, aliens and the Lost Ark, faces of the gods, aliens and superheroes, and this is just up to season 10. Anything a god was ever said to do in any religious text, aliens did it. Which brings me to the ultimate core of why this show exists, and what the ancient astronaut theory really is. Ancient Aliens is not a history show using science fiction elements. It doesn't even take elements from science fiction. Ancient Aliens is a religion. Its gods are aliens. Aliens so powerful and influential they control the every whim of mortal man, and their great deeds cannot even be fathomed by us, except for a few enlightened individuals. And most importantly, denouncing any gods other than their own. All the gods that ever existed or were depicted were not simply a part of mythology. They were real physical beings, extraterrestrials. So Ancient Aliens goes through any religious text that has ever existed and reads it as literally as possible. Clearly, the gods do not exist as they were depicted, so the only other explanation would be alien contact. Ancient Aliens isn't just a religion, it's creationism with extra steps. In fact, the only thing keeping it from really being creationism is saying dinosaurs and humans lived together. Oh, come on.
Might ancient depictions of dinosaurs really be proof that humans and dinosaurs did, at one time, coexist?
Work to do now as they come up on second.
On to season 16, you can tell that nobody really wants to be there anymore. I don't want to be here. It's repeated the same evidence of Bermuda Triangle, Stonehenge, and Mayan temples for so long, but it continues on because it's easy money. History Channel is a dying network in part because it decided to promote half-baked mythology like this show, or Pawn Stars.
You know I can't eat donuts. I gotta have lean protein.
He is on a diet. We shouldn't be eating the stuff around him.
All right, that's okay. You can't have none, chum.
I'm not sweating this.
But now it's made its deal with the alien devil, and it's tied to its most profitable show.
Here you go.
That's just mainstream history and archaeology closing your mind to the possibilities. Keep believing whatever it is they taught you in school. I'll keep knowing the truth.
Alright, well, better wrap this up. Since Ancient Aliens, or the Ancient Astronaut Theory, is pretty much a religion, like any religion, it has to have a good end-of-the-world story, right? Oh boy, does it. It's just the apocalypse. The literal biblical apocalypse. 4 horsemen, the battle between heaven and hell, Sam has to become the devil, but you know, the alien versions of that. 2 warring alien factions come to Earth to fight over the ultimate fate of the planet and mankind. The world is destroyed as all the calamities you can ever imagine occur. Mankind, which was never in control of itself, is destroyed by 2 alien factions none of us even know exist except for these guys on this History Channel show. We should have known, and it's all set to happen on December 21st, 2012.
This is Jess, Peloton instructor, educator.
In this video, we will be covering all things World War II, from some of the most unbelievable single-man missions against all odds, to strange occult discoveries, dark magic and technology studied mostly by Germany during the war, to insane new experimental weapons, some involving human Frankenstein and super soldier experiments, and the origin of super soldiers, and some very clever and very tricky battle war tactics, and much, much more. So grab a drink. My choice today is good old plain English tea, just like the boys used to drink in World War II, probably with a little splash of rum in. And just before we start the video, there is some new limited edition hand-drawn Halloween merch up, available in the shop down below, and I just absolutely adore this. It features some of our favorite cryptids, monsters, even aliens. I absolutely love the design. So yeah, grab them while they are still available. As I said, this is going to be a limited Halloween run. Thank you as always to everyone who supports the channel, and join me as we explore the ultimate World War II iceberg. Tier 0, the origins of the Nazis. So I thought it would be appropriate to set some ground knowledge for this video for the start of the war, and just exactly how the war started and how the Nazi Party came to be. And as you should all know if you've watched my World War I iceberg, World War I started when a political figure, Franz Ferdinand, got assassinated. This started a war between Austria-Hungary and Serbia. Then Russia backed up Serbia. Germany, who is in allegiance with Austria-Hungary, then declared war on Russia. And so then France, who is in allegiance with Russia, declared war on Germany. And this is basically how World War I kicked off. Germany and its allies then lost the First World War, and Germany was then given this massive bill basically by the Allied powers saying, you started the war, you were responsible for it, and you lost, so you have to pay us all of this money. And this included handing over a bunch of their military stuff, like ships and submarines and weapons, and also there was a few ground rules of you can't have any military in this whole area, which is basically like the buffer zone with France, and you also have to shrink the size of your military to stop this happening in the future, which obviously didn't end up working. Oh, and we're also going to take back a bunch of the land that you took. So I think it's safe to say Germany at the end of World War I was in a pretty crappy spot. So compared to when they started the war, their country was smaller, it was poorer, their military was smaller, they had less population due to all of these deaths, and on top of that, they had this huge bill, this huge debt that they had to pay to the Allied countries. So soon enough, hyperinflation kicked in, people were starving in the streets, everyone was broke and poor and dejected and probably sad, and that all led to this rise of this well-spoken man with a mustache who, just like Lenin in Russia, spoke a great deal to the people, convinced them that they shouldn't really have lost the First World War, and that it was possible for them to take back the land that they had lost and to make the country rich again, you know, basically promising them land and bread just like Lenin did, and that he was the man to make all of this happen. And so he started off with some somewhat tame ideas of like, right, we're gonna whip the country into shape, we're gonna root out any corruption, we're gonna clean up the streets, and slowly the people were more and more on board with this, which allowed the Nazi Party and Hitler to raise an army, to refuse to pay the Allies, the debt that they were charged with, and to create more land for Germany and the Germans, known at the time as Lebensraum, or living space. And this was by taking over Austria, Czechoslovakia, and Poland, which was kind of like the line that was crossed over, which brought France and Britain into the war. So that's more or less how World War II started. But we next have to ask just
fuck you. No, fuck you. That's not more or less how World War II started. You're completely forgetting the fall of the Weimar Republic, my guy. So essentially, I need to pause the game. There was the Weimar Republic, which was a robust social democracy. Rosa Luxemburg was the leader. Got executed because bada bing, bada boom, things don't go well. Bada bing, bada boom, gets thrown off a bridge. Bada bing, bada boom, people keep radicalizing. Bada bing, bada boom, Freikorps troops keep happening. Bada bing, bada boom, disgruntled World War I soldiers basically keep radicalizing. Bada bing, bada boom, Hitler does rise to power. Bada bing, bada boom, he didn't even mention the beer hall push. Bada bing, bada boom. How are you not gonna mention the beer hall push? This guy, Connor's Curiosities. I can immediately tell what his biases are because he compared Hitler to Lenin. Hitler was nothing like Lenin. If anything, he was like Stalin. But I digress.
Have to ask just how and exactly why the Nazi Party formed in the first place. So, as with events and situations like this, it would seem that extreme situations call for extreme measures. Because Germany and its people at the time were basically in an extreme situation, they were very broke, a lot of them couldn't even afford to eat. Germany as a whole, I think, was vulnerable and open to being taken over in a way by one of the most hardline political parties that promised to be insanely strict, whip the country back into shape, do whatever was necessary to raise the wealth and the experience of the German people. And that party was the Nazi Party. And to explain the origins of them, we need to go quickly back to 1917, which is basically just after World War I, just towards the end of it. And there was a man named Rudolf von Subottendorf, which honestly, Germans have the most ridiculous names. Like, I love the names, but they are just so insane. And he established something called the Thule Society. And this was this kind of pseudo-conspiracy. A few things that we will touch on a little bit later. But basically, two members of this society, Karl Hauer and Anton Draxler, which was the party that a young Hitler ended up joining, and he soon climbed up its ranks, became a leading member in it, and actually changed the name of the party from the German Workers' Party to the National Socialist German Workers' Party. And this eventually became shortened to the Nazi Party, just because of the words National Socialist in German, and so that is how the Nazi Party was formed. But at the base of all this, at the root of this founding, was, as we mentioned, the Thule Society, and they were into some pretty insane stuff. It was named after Thule, which was this mythical land spoken about in ancient Greek sources mostly. And it was said to be this strange land in the north that was thought by this Thule Society, it was thought to be the homeland and the origin of all Aryan people. And this was like this ancient sort of people, the white skin, blonde hair, blue eyes sort of idea. And these were, according to this Thule Society, they were basically superior in every single way compared to normal humans or compared to other races. Like, just think of them like Aragorn from Lord of the Rings or something, the Numenorians. They were like, yeah, we're taller, stronger, faster, smarter, and so the Thule society was obsessed with this land. They were obsessed with these Aryan people, and they believed that a lot of the Nordic people were like the purest Aryan people, and that obviously the Germans, the Germanic people were basically pure Aryan as well. But the idea was these Aryan people, over the years, over time, through thousands of years, they had come from Thule, they had slowly spread out over the world, and that they were basically the best human possible, and they founded all of the great civilizations. So, for example, ancient Egypt, according to this society that was founded by Aryan people, as apparently before the Aryan people were there, it was just a bunch of people living in a desert. The Aryan people came down, they were in charge of forming this civilization, of arranging for these pyramids to be built, these great things. And also, other Aryans who traveled further east into China and India, they started civilizations, and they were responsible for the birth of some of the greatest dynasties and religions and civilizations in that part of the world. And it's quite interesting, because certain types of Indian people, and especially Iranian people, the Persians, we can actually trace them, their genealogy, their DNA, to basically being Aryan. And so it's a little bit like all of the people originally in Britain, for example. They were more Celtic, and then you have the invasion of the Germanic tribes, the Angles and the Saxons. And so nowadays, a lot of the people in Britain would be Anglo-Saxon. And it's exactly the same in places like India, where you had the original Indian people. And then you had these Aryan tribes who came over, basically ended up toppling them, becoming the dominant race over there. But that was so long ago that the genes have mixed since that time. But still, modern-day Persian people and Indian people do have their roots in the ancient Aryan people. And so the Nazis knew this, but of course they used it to push all of their supremacist and racist ideology, instead of just seeing it as a normal part of migration for people all around the world. But of course, even though they saw these other races as having Aryan roots, they didn't really respect them like they did other Germans, as they said to, for example, the Persians and the Indians, like, yes, we know you are technically Aryan, but like, you've mixed with all of these other races, and so you're not pure blood Aryans like us Germans, for example. And so they recognized their Aryan roots, but they were, of course, still racist towards them. And so that was their rooted ideology. And so to support that, to support the belief that Aryans founded almost every great civilization, the Thule society was obsessed with going around the world trying to find ancient artifacts that prove this theory. And this even goes to explain their symbol, the swastika. So the swastika itself, which is normally flipped around the other way from how the Nazis had it, but this symbol goes back an unbelievable amount of time, like 10, 15,000 years at least, and it was used all over the kind of east, also in parts of Europe, in parts of Africa, and the label for it, swastika, comes from the ancient Sanskrit swastika, meaning good fortune or well-being, which is very ironic. But of course, in their crazy, mixed up Nazi mind, they thought, well, since this symbol goes back 15,000 years to the start of these great civilizations, then it must have been Aryan people who came up with it. And so now it's a Aryan symbol as opposed to an ancient, mostly Eastern one. So that explains why they kind of took the symbol for themselves. They flipped it around to make it a bit unique, and it is now, for the most part, obviously a massive symbol of hate. And so yeah, I mentioned the Egyptian civilization before, but they also thought that the Aryan people, for example, founded the Incas, some of the most powerful civilizations in South America. Also, they founded Atlantis before it sunk. They founded the great Roman and Greek empires, and they also obviously founded the Persian Empire, according to them, and they were responsible for civilizations in India. Maybe you should talk about the beer hall push. The Koreans and the Japanese, and so you can see this kind of extremism all the Nazi party might have come from if the Thule Society founded the original political party, and then this political party was changed slightly and then became the Nazi party. But still had its roots in the Thule Society, still had a bunch of members who were obsessed with all of this sort of stuff. And with the Thule Society itself being quite extreme. You know, it's not like saying, oh, they were the great people back then.
If you want to talk about Aryans, talk about the Anunnaki.
In every single way. Every single great civilization and people were because of the Aryan people. Like, it's such an extreme and insane point of view and mindset that you can see how that transformed into the extremism of the Nazis. They also said Aryans were responsible for the invention of writing, for the invention of science.
Maybe I'm gonna be completely blown away, and this guy will talk about all the shit. Maybe Connor's curiosity will blow me out the fucking water. But you know what? I highly fucking doubt it.
A lot of the Nazis and the German people were actually Christian, even though the person they worship, Jesus Christ, was a Jew, and they hated Jews, so how the hell did that work out? Well, there's a very easy fix for that if you are a believer in this Thule theory, and you just want to throw logic and rationality and history just all out the window. But the solution for that, for them, was that Jesus wasn't really a Jew, but he was a man born in the area to a Roman soldier. And this Roman soldier, of course, was a person of Aryan descent. And according to the Nazis, Jesus was actually rallying him and his 12 disciples and anyone else that he could muster. He was rallying them all to attack and kill the Jews, but sadly he failed his mission and he was stopped before he was able to do so. So, yeah, the Nazis are honestly just wild. Like, the amount of cognitive dissonance going on in their heads is just mind-blowing. But that is basically a rough history of the Nazis, you know, a layout of how World War II started, the state of Germany around
you gotta talk about the beer hall push,
and then how the Nazi Party came to be, where it got its roots and beliefs from, and so I think that's a pretty good backdrop for the context of this video. And so let us get into some of these entries, which explore some of the strangest, most surprising, and honestly downright interesting facts about World War II. In Tier 1, we have Die Glocke, which is...
Oh, fuck you, Die Glocke, starting with the dumbest shit ever. No, it's time to educate people now. Wikipedia time. What was the beer hall push? In 1923... it was also known as the Munich Push. It was a failed coup d'etat led by Adolf Hitler in 1923 during the period of the Weimar Republic. It failed due to a lack of military support, leading to a violent confrontation in which 4 police officers and 16 pushes were killed. Adolf Hitler was arrested, in which he wrote the book Mein Kampf. That's kind of fucking important. That's kind of fucking important. That's kind of fucking important. He wrote the book Mein Kampf during this coup. You fucking coward! You're gonna call this video the ultimate World War II iceberg and not talk about the Weimar Republic? You fucking coward!
Which is German for the bell, which is pretty innocent sounding. But Die Glocke was an apparent secret weapon developed by the Nazis during the war.
I hope he
there is
sees
honestly
this.
not too much evidence for this, for various reasons. But as the legends go, it was this large bell-shaped device that may have been a few different things depending on what sources you listen to. Some say it was a large flying saucer sort of technology, or an aircraft.
How do you leave out the preamble to World War II?
Nuclear device
dumbass.
used for either causing damage
did you
or
just feel
generating
that
energy
unnecessary?
or just something else entirely.
Unnecessary?
And this entry, deglocker,
Rosa Luxemburg got thrown off a fucking bridge!
But it does open a far wider subject, a far more interesting subject.
Whatever,
and that was
whatever,
the Nazis' obsession with finding and securing ancient artifacts, and with their testing and creating of these new types of technologies, with them either being purely scientific or more dubious and mythical, legendary, occult sort of in nature, or just was due to a few reasons. One being that if they could discover and acquire some of these artifacts, like for instance the Holy Grail or the Ark of the Covenant, as seen in Indiana Jones, or for example Thor's hammer, Meow Meow, as well as all sorts of other types of ancient technology, artifacts, trinkets, even stuff and items relating to Jesus, like the spear of Longinus, which was apparently the spear that they jabbed into his side as he was up on the cross, which again, if you're interested in ancient artifacts, I do cover a bunch of them on my artifacts iceberg, link down below. But all of that is basically to say that the Nazis, especially Heinrich Himmler and his personal army, the SS, they were obsessed with finding all of these artifacts, with linking them up to the Aryan race. So for example, if they did find the Holy Grail, they would use their crazy Nazi logic to be like, oh, there's a symbol on here which links to this, which links to this, which is originally an Aryan symbol. And pretty much anything they found, they would somehow link it back to the Aryan race in order to confirm their crazy theories. And so they would often send teams of soldiers and science and archaeologists basically all over the world, to Northern Africa, to the Middle East, to Nordic countries, trying to find these lost artifacts. But as well as Die Glocke, there was also something else called Project Riese, which was German for Project Giant. And it basically lived up to its name. It was this huge project, in fact multiple projects all under one, and they were held and took place in these huge, mysterious underground caverns and caves and tunnels.
I love this video, but how are you not going to mention the beer hall push?
All built underneath the Owl Mountains, which pretty ominous.
Or the Reichstag.
Sounding, I know, and inside and under Cujange Castle, which I'll admit is pretty ominous looking. It looks like it would have some crazy experiments happening within it. But this was all in modern day Poland, and this was this huge base that was used both as a headquarters for the Germans, as well as a weapons factory, both for regular weapons and for experimental weapons, and also research projects, experimental projects, unknown projects, as we don't know exactly necessarily what was happening down here. It was built and dug mostly by prisoners, which were mostly Jewish prisoners from Auschwitz, with at least 13,000 of them digging tunnels, smashing rocks, performing general hard labor, and most importantly, keeping their mouths shut. Because a big reason for this was it's easier to keep a secret, secret tunnels if you use prisoners to build them, because you can just kill them afterwards, rather than hiring in thousands of German workers. You have to bring them in, they might go off and tell other people, and so yeah, this project was top.
Hitler literally wrote Mein Kampf.
Secret. And during the building of these tunnels, at least 5,000 Jewish prisoners died, which was either from a lack of food or water, or both, or from the hardships of this forced labor. But eventually in 1945, when the Russians were advancing upon this area, the Germans decided to completely abandon it. And so, to keep their secrets, they started burning and shredding documents, throwing them in giant pools of water, and they started to bury a bunch of these rooms and tunnels by either blowing up entrances to them, collapsing the ceilings, flooding entire areas of the tunnels. And so even
home push of the
still to
Weimar
this
Republic
day,
at
there
all
are
during your
huge
preamble
amounts of this
to the
underground tunnel
origins
system
to the
that
Nazi
are
Party.
completely
That is a crucial
unexplored,
part of
which has
history, and
obviously
you slept
spurred
on
on
it
rumors
entirely.
of experimental projects,
Hitler
of
literally
perhaps
wrote Mein
alien
Kampf after
discoveries
he
and
went to jail
technologies
because
down
of the
there,
failed
whether
coup.
that is super soldier experiments or secret dangerous weapons or crazy rare artifacts or discoveries of new elements. But yeah, I think this entry went a little bit off topic of Die Glocke, but that is all to say that the Germans are super into these crazy
failed
secret
as a
experimental
historian,
technologies, and
as a
there are a few more of them
content
which
creator.
we will cover
I'm
further
sorry.
down in the iceberg.
You
The Lost
lose!
Gold Train is a legend surrounding World War II that says that during the end of the war, Germany is panicking, the Allies are closing in on them on all sides, and so in a last-ditch effort to secure some of their wealth and treasures, etc., they load around 330 tons of gold, of precious jewels, of priceless arts and weapons and artifacts, while it was en route from Breslau in modern-day Poland to Wałbrzych, also in modern-day Poland. So they loaded this train with all these goodies. They were sending it a little further west away from the advancing troops, and during that journey it basically disappeared and was never seen again. Now, some people think that this was all a ruse by the Nazis just to hide where they transported it or where they stored it, and that they did actually successfully transport it, and then they took all the stuff, they sold it off. But because this train apparently disappeared somewhere around our previous entry, or specifically somewhere around the Owl Mountains and Kijorsk Castle, that maybe, just maybe, the Nazis hid this train down in these tunnels, hoping to someday perhaps retrieve it. But that someday never came when they lost the war. These tunnels remained collapsed and flooded, and they destroyed all documentation surrounding this. So maybe even they themselves didn't really know where they left it. Nazi zombies. Oh boy. So you'll be happy to hear that this isn't just from the Call of Duty games, which was honestly one of the best mini-games like ever released, period. It was just amazing. But just quickly before we get into this entry, if you do like a bunch of World War II Nazi headcanon theories, and if you haven't played any of the Nazi zombie Call of Duty games, I would absolutely recommend checking out a full video on some of the Easter eggs and the storyline within them, as the amount of details
this video's
and hidden
stupid.
Easter eggs and references.
This video's fucking stupid. I've lost all respect for this guy. Connor's Curiosities. Like I said, most iceberg videos are fucking dog shit. Remove from this iceberg, remove from this playlist. Eventually I'm gonna publish this playlist so people can watch every video that is on the stream playlist. Let's watch something good. You want to know about something local? Let's watch about the pizza bomber. Something that happened locally in Erie, Pennsylvania.
Have been described by federal agents at 1:30 p.m. on August the 28th of 2003, a pizza delivery driver named Brian Wells would go out on what seemed to be a normal pizza delivery. 1 hour later, he would be standing in a PNC bank with a shotgun in his hand and a bomb strapped to his chest, demanding $250,000. The tragedy and mysteries that began to unfold that day have been described by federal agents as one of the most complicated and bizarre crimes in the annals of the FBI. Hello everybody, today we are going to be talking about FBI Major Case 203, the Bomb Collar Bank Heist. The events of the Bomb Collar Bank Heist are among the most bizarre in criminal history. Those of you that have heard of this case know how absolutely insane it is, and to those of you that haven't, you are in for it today. Now, to try to help us make sense of all of this, I, for one, have a whiteboard, but also cute little mug shots that I printed out of everyone involved to try to help us wrap our minds around all of this insanity. Now, over the course of this video, I'm going to be referencing journalists and news sites that originally covered this information, as opposed to my arts and crafts project. But the primary one I want to recommend is the Netflix miniseries Evil Genius, made by Barbara Schroeder and Trey Borzillieri, as they not only did a great job covering the events, but also went and interviewed people and got first-hand accounts and information that can be found nowhere else that we're going to talk about today. So if this case interests you, I highly recommend you check out the 4-episode miniseries on Netflix. And today, I'm going to try to go through and tell the story in the timeline that it was revealed to the public and investigators at large. So if you're familiar with this case and you're yelling at the screen at any point if I say something that was proven to be wrong later down the line, I'm laying out information in the order it was discovered. So don't worry, we'll get there. So if you're interested in hearing what turned out to be an overly complicated and cruel bank heist, then stick around as we talk about the bomb
I learned about the beer hall push in like
it's just going to be
grade.
Really sad and depressing.
Granted,
It'll be funny.
I was in the
some
gifted
parts,
program.
But mostly just sad.
I'm a former gifted
So
kid.
if you're interested in that, you've come to the right place. But before I talk about something that will definitely be bad for your brain, let's talk about something that will definitely be good for your body. Like today's sponsor, Athletic Greens. And specifically, their fantastic product, the dietary supplement to help you start your day on the right foot, and from there, and what after is just a pleasant drink that made simple. One is 5.
No. Back.
At 1:30 p.m. on August the 28th of 2003, a pizza delivery driver named Brian Wells would go out on what seemed to be a normal pizza delivery. Corporeal form to give you information. Diagrams in this video that seem helpful. I encourage you to check them out. There'll be links in the description. And thank you, pizzabomber.com, for the work you're doing. On August the 28th of 2003, a 46-year-old pizza delivery driver named Brian Wells was working his normal shift at the Mamma Mia's Pizzeria in Erie, Pennsylvania. Everything was going normal until around 1:30 p.m. The owner of the pizzeria received a delivery call. The owner couldn't understand what the guy on the other end of the line was saying, so he passed the phone to Brian. Brian says that the call was for 2 sausage pizzas to be delivered to 8631 Peachtree. Brian drives to the location that turns out to be an abandoned radio station. It also turns out that after future investigation, the original phone call was made from a nearby gas station. Brian goes to deliver the pizzas, and all seems normal for now, until nearly an hour had passed by and Brian hadn't come back to work. What might have happened to Brian in that hour of lost time will be discussed later, but what matters now is what happened at 2:30. At around 2:30 p.m., Brian walked into a local PNC bank. He was holding a cane and wearing a t-shirt that had "Guess" written across it. Underneath the t-shirt, something was lying on his chest. When Brian gets to the counter, he slides a note to the teller demanding $250,000. He also reveals that the cane that he's holding is a shotgun in disguise, and that underneath his shirt is a large bomb collar. Somehow, in that hour of time between delivering the pizza and showing up here at the bank, Brian had a bomb strapped to his chest with what seemed to be a giant metal handcuff wrapped around his neck to keep it in place. The note that he slid the teller was ridiculously long, and I'm not going to read all of it for sake of time, but as you can see here, this is way more information than is needed to just say, "Give me $250,000. The teller says that the vault cannot be open at this time, and the best she can do is give him all the money they have in the register. So Bryant walked out with $8,702. During this time, other tellers were trying to usher people out of the bank, and a few people began to call the police. From here, Bryant drove to a McDonald's parking lot, I'll explain why later, and then from there, about 15 minutes after the robbery took place, police pull him over in the parking lot of Eyeglass World, just as Bryant was trying to leave the McDonald's. Police get Bryant out of the car, arrest him, but as they're arresting him, he mentions something about a bomb. The officers look under his shirt, and sure enough, He has a bomb collar strapped to his neck. The police immediately clear the street and begin to evacuate the nearby buildings and roads so that no one gets hurt. The initial stop was made around 2:54 and the bomb squad was called at around 3:04. But there was a problem with the bomb squad. Rob the bank if someone else has done that to him, so they begin to ask him questions. All that Brian says is that 3 black men held him down and strapped the bomb to his neck. When asked to further identify these men, he couldn't and simply